We will call this meeting to order. Rosa, would you please call the roll?
Mayor Barnett,
Here.
Commissioner Jose,
Here.
Commissioner Sadowski-Fugit,
Here.
Commissioner Gilmartin,
Here.
Commissioner Glover,
Here.
Commissioner Tully, Commissioner Davenport.
Here.
And with the change of agenda, we will now take a recess and reconvene at, 6:15? I think is the time?
6 o'clock.
6 o'clock?
You need a formal motion?
We'll reconvene at 6 o'clock.
Let's do a motion on that, just so we have it on the record.
Okay.
Mayor, I move to recess until 6 o'clock.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, we are recessed until 6. Good evening, everyone. Welcome. We had an executive session prior, so we're reconvening back in here. We'll begin this portion of the meeting with the Pledge of Allegiance. Item 5, because we had some earlier activities in executive session. Item 5, we have some proclamations this week. We have 2, Public Works Week and EMS Week. Whereas the year 2024 marks the 64th Annual National Public Works Week, sponsored by the American Public Works Association. Whereas Downers Grove Public Works services include our water supply, public buildings, streets, sidewalks, traffic control signals, our urban forest, fleet maintenance, stormwater management, and more, as provided in our community and are an integral part of our citizens' everyday lives. Whereas public works professionals focus on infrastructure, facilities, and services is of vital importance to sustainable and resilient communities and to the public health, quality of life, safety, comfort, and well-being of the residents, businesses, and guests of Downers Grove. Whereas these infrastructures, facilities, and services could not be provided without the hard work and dedicated efforts of public works professionals who are engineers, managers, and technicians. Whereas the support of an understanding and informed citizenry is vital to the efficient operation of public works systems and programs such as water, stormwater, streets, transportation, and our public buildings. Whereas the efficiency of the qualified and dedicated personnel who staff the Downers Grove Public Works Department is materially improved by a positive attitude toward and understanding of the importance of the work they perform. Whereas the 2024 National Public Works Association theme for Public Work Week is Advancing Quality of Life for All, highlighting the contributions of these professionals to advance and enhance our quality of life and to provide essential services that lead to healthier, happier, more vibrant communities. Now therefore, I, Robert T. Barnett, Mayor of the Village of Downers Grove, do hereby proclaim the week of May 19th through 25th, 2024 as Public Works Week in the Village of Downers Grove, and call upon all citizens and civic organizations to acquaint themselves with the issues involved in providing our public works and to recognize the contribution which public works personnel make every day to our health, safety, comfort, and quality of life. Dated this 21st day of May 2024, Downers Grove, Illinois. Our Public Works Director, Dave Moody, is here to accept this proclamation. EMS Week. Whereas the week of May 19th through 25th, 2024 is designated as the 50th Annual Emergency Medical Services Week. Whereas the members of the Downers Grove Fire Department render vital and nationally recognized and award-winning fire, rescue, and emergency medical services in the Village of Downers Grove. Whereas access to timely, high-quality emergency care dramatically improves the survival and recovery rate of those who experience sudden illness or injury, and the Downers Grove Fire Department provides such life-saving care to those in need 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Whereas the Downers Grove Fire Department team members have not hesitated to take on new roles, embrace new technologies, and constant learning, training, and preparation. Whereas the members of the Downers Grove Fire Department engage in thousands of hours of specialized training and continuing education to enhance their life-saving skills. Whereas the 2024 theme for EMS Week, Honoring Our Past, Forging Our Future, reminds us to acknowledge the foundational work of those who came before us, while the Downers Grove Fire Department also strives to build and lead the EMS system we envision for our future. Whereas the observance of Emergency Medical Services Week provides an excellent opportunity for the community to recognize the value and accomplishments of the members of the Downers Grove Fire Department who work and train diligently throughout the year to provide the citizens and visitors of Downers Grove with quality, caring emergency medical care. Now therefore, I, Robert T. Barnett, Mayor of the Village of Downers Grove, do hereby proclaim the week of May 19th through 25th, 2024 as Emergency Medical Services Week, and encourage all residents to share their appreciation for the selfless EMS professionals who provide life-saving services every day in our community. Dated this 21st day of May, 2024, Downers Grove, Illinois. And some of our team members are here to accept this proclamation. Couple of real pieces of the backbone of our community there, guys. Item 6, minutes of previous council meetings. Is there a motion?
Mayor, I move that the council adopt the May 14th, 2024 minutes as presented.
Second.
Any comments or questions from the council? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Passes unanimously. Item 7, the public comments portion of our meeting. This portion of our meeting is an opportunity for the public to comment on items not on tonight's agenda. This first item on the agenda, titled Public Comments, is again for items not on the agenda. There will be times later for public comment on items both on the active and first reading portions of the agenda. Please remember, council meetings are not open debates. We seldom, if ever, cut people off, and we do expect that people will respect the time limit, allowing everyone an opportunity to speak this evening. If you plan to speak, please keep the following in mind when you come to the podium. State your name for the record, address your comments to me as the chair of the meeting. Keep comments to 5 minutes or less. Avoid repeating what others have said. It's okay to say you agree with the previous speaker. In fact, you'll often hear council members doing the same. Please keep your comments to one visit to the podium per subject. And remember, comments are most effective when they focus on subjects within the scope of Downers Grove Village governance. So with that, public comments not on the agenda, please come on down to the podium.
Hi, my name is Clorna Greco, and I've been in business here in Downers Grove for 38 years. I just wanted to clarify something about the parking garage. The first floor is the only designated spot for residential parking. We have 66 spots that the village can give out to residents. We have just filled by passing Pierce Tavern, giving them 10 spots, 65 spots. So keep that in mind when you're talking about overnight guests and where they're going to park. As I've stated before, the parking for residential should be moved to the top floor where we have 100 spots up there. And if the people were allowed to park on the street between 2 a.m. and 6 a.m., their cars would be subject to snow, rain, hail, and everything else, instead of taking all that away from the businesses in Downers Grove. Thank you.
Thank you. Others?
Good evening, Mayor Barnett, Commissioners, and Village staff. My name's Warner Kienkin. I'm one of the residents. And for years, one of my programs was a crisis intervention program run out of an emergency room in a major hospital. And therefore, I can really appreciate all the work that the EMS staff does. Because I remember at 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, them bringing in people who had been very much injured out on the streets and them serving them and maintaining their lives. So thank you for your service. Last week, I introduced the theme of Downers Grove being our home. On June the 19th, 2024, we will be celebrating the holiday of Juneteenth. Several parks and surrounding communities will be sponsoring events. I'd like to take this opportunity to discuss the significance of Juneteenth for the African American community. In 1619, we learn from our history books that the first slaves were brought to the United States. To understand slavery, I would ask you each to do some research on the Lewis and Clark expedition and the story of their slave York. It is a very interesting but also very sad story, but it highlights what slavery was all about. On January 1st, 1863, President Lincoln issued the Emancipation Proclamation, which ended slavery for approximately 4 million enslaved people in the United States. However, in Texas, slaves were not informed that this had occurred, and the military had to be called in to free the slaves 2 years later. In 1865, slavery was effectively ended. Juneteenth is effectively the Independence Day for the African American community in this country. However, this emancipation was followed by another 100 years of segregation and ill treatment. It was not until 1954 that apartheid was ended in this country with Brown versus the Board of Education. Racial attitudes are still with us today. In summary, the African American community has 350 years history of slavery and discrimination in this country. Brown, the Voting Rights Act, Martin Luther King are all a part of my history, as this happened in my lifetime. So it's not too long ago. Because of this history, Juneteenth is significant to many African American persons. If we are to be a welcoming community, I would ask that the council develop a proclamation to make the village aware of this history. African American Downers Grove residents should be included in this recognition, and I would be willing to assist with this. Thank you.
Janet Whittingham, Downers Grove resident. Happened to be in Anderson's bookstore today and struck up a conversation with a couple of ladies in the store talking about parking. I didn't start it, and concerns about not having sufficient parking and the plan to remove additional make it less parking because of the outdoor dining plans and so forth. I happened to mention that I'd be here tonight, and I promised them I would pass on their message, and they were grateful with that. One of the ladies said that a senior citizen said she has a friend who doesn't come to the library anymore because she cannot walk well, and there's not sufficient parking that's close by the door for her to be able to use the library. I was there this afternoon. It was about 2 o'clock this afternoon, not peak time. Every space was full. The handicap spaces were all full. I got the last 15-minute slot, which, by the way, in my opinion, should be moved to the end of the row because the two 15-minute spots that are there are right next to the door, and they should be for handicap spaces, in my opinion. But be that as it may, the parking lot was full. And the parking lot across the street was, didn't drive through it, so I don't know if it was completely full, but it was full. We deserve convenient parking, and I want convenient parking, and I don't make any apology for asking for convenient parking. I know that y'all folks have said, you go to the mall and you walk further. Well, I don't pay taxes to the mall. I don't elect the officials to the mall. It's private property, and they make their own rules. And I think we're entitled as citizens of this community to have sufficient opportunity to make convenient visits to the businesses and other sufficient other venues that we want to frequent. There are professional services there along Main Street that require lengthy parking, lawyers, accountants, therapists, others that need, not just restaurants, that need parking. And I know you all listen, and you've made it very clear that you listen very hard. I believe that, but we don't want to just be heard, we want to be heeded. So I think it's your job to come up with a resolution of compromise to serve everybody, not just the restaurants, not just the businesses, and the other retailers who are not serving alcohol and food. So on behalf of the two ladies in Anderson's bookstore, I convey their message and my own. So thank you.
Ed Brainer, a long-term resident of Downers Grove. Good evening, Mayor and Village Council. A shout out to the Downers Grove Fire Department. You guys are incredible. Thank you for what you do. With your removal of William Nienberg from the Library Board of Trustees for little to no reason, for example, not getting along with all the other trustees, for daring to ask questions, to have different opinions, such egregious charges. You have now left our library with their $6 million annual budget, our taxpayer dollars, that is, with no oversight. A board of trustees with no balance, no diversity of opinion, all just falling in line with whatever Director Milovic wants. With this decision and dismissal of the only sensible library trustee already made, you must not give Director Milovic and the rest of the trustees a pass on lying to residents and breaking the law and various other infractions. Cases in point, lying. At a recent library board meeting, Director Milovic lied to me regarding a library safety incident, stating, "There's never been a drunk man in the children's room here." Well, it did happen, and I have the incident report, and it was sent to me by Director Milovic. But today she can't find that incident report. Breaking the law. Director Milovic's released over 28,000 names of Downers Grove Public Library cardholders. This is illegal, according to the Library Records Confidentiality Act. The trustees' president recently screaming at residents, cutting off individuals' presentations during meetings, thus breaking their own library code of conduct. Lack of safety in the library. The library provides little to no safety within the library for our children. I've cited dozens and dozens of safety incidents over the past 2 years that have occurred at the library that have required the police to come to the library, and yet nothing changes at all. These changes cannot be ignored, especially in light of the questionable dismissal of Mr. Nienberg. In my opinion, this Board of Trustees should all be censured. The director should be fired. There must be at least a full investigation into breaking the law, lying, and the lack of library safety for our children. The Village Council must not let the library fester and these pending charges against the director and the trustees. The library needs your urgent and prompt attention. Oversight is the first and foremost. Then a full investigation of the director and trustees so that these concerns at our library can be addressed and corrected. Thank you.
Hello, Christine Martin. I have a question about parking, the spaces that are taken up by the restaurants. My question is, do the restaurants pay extra taxes for those parking spaces? How does that work?
We'll get an answer to you.
Pardon me?
We'll get you an answer. There's an agreement. They sign a license agreement, just like the people that use the sidewalks for dining have for decades.
Okay.
I don't know the details of it, Christine. It's not all right here, but we'll get you an answer.
Okay, fine. Thank you. The parking, I have understood, is because the restaurants bring in more revenue than other businesses. And I don't know, again, if that's true, maybe it is, but there are other businesses, and I think it takes away from other businesses. So, thank you. I look forward to your answer. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Selma Moberg. I wasn't intending to get up here and speak about this issue tonight, but I wanted to piggyback off of the little gal from Anderson Bookstore. Last week I mentioned that I couldn't get through on Curtis, so I shot up south on Main. And all I wanted to do was go to my bank on Saturday, which is right in the heart of town. You can't even get through because of these big concrete pylons that are in the middle of the streets. I'm waiting for people to start sunbathing in the middle of the streets because they take up so much parking. It's absolutely ridiculous. You know, after COVID, it was one thing, but COVID is long gone, and they are still taking up the streets. And I swear to goodness, I'm like, if I see one more person in the street, and I'm not joking, I'm ready for them to start sunbathing, I'm like, it's ridiculous. They don't deserve to sit in the street. Dining on the sidewalk is fine. That's what makes it special about dining outdoors. But in the street, it's off limits. Thank you.
Good evening, I'm Ian Ogden. First, before I start saying anything, I want to express my heartfelt gratitude to our EMS people. I know they got recognized tonight. I have personally experienced a top-notch service that they're able to provide in this town on multiple occasions, so that's awesome. But yeah, the real point I was going to make was infrastructure. So in this town, we seem to have an infrastructure problem. We do have a lot of expansion, a lot of population growth, commercial growth. But I believe that we need to take a pause and look at the look at the roads, look at the traffic, look at the facilities to be able to handle that population growth. Like if you look at Chicago's history, the reason they had to come up with the Chicago City Plan from Daniel Burnham, Edward H. Bennett, is because they realized there was a lot of expansion going on, and they knew that they needed to do something to be able to organize that expansion so that it wouldn't become a messy, dirty kind of place that was crumbling. So I think that it's really important that we need to take a look at that here, or else we're going to have, I think, similar problems. I mean, so far we've been able to handle it, but I think that it could very easily kind of spill over into something that we can't really handle. I mean, if you look at Main Street during rush hour, it's like if an EMS vehicle were to try to get through that gridlock at that time, it would be very difficult for them to do that in a timely manner, and I think we need to address that in this town. So that's all I wanted to say. Thank you.
Hi, my name is James Kelly. I'm the director in charge of James Kelly Publishing Company, LLC. I'm kind of self-promoting myself tonight, but it's a two-bladed sword. My old company was called Dad's Business. My clients were Comedy Central, Fox 32, Intuition Music, and His Fun Times. I was encouraged to, stay in this town if I'm interested. Yeah, I fell in love with the town, and the mayor encouraged me with one or two things. But in kind of my resume is that I have the background, I just didn't always have the patience and the desire to go back into the industry as a consultant in advertising. I'm a little upset tonight because there's been, with some associates of mine, interest in doing a coffee shop in Fairview, and I asked about it, and I was told, yeah. And then I had sent an appointment and that I did some stuff for with an oil and gas company, And he was told, yeah, we'd love to have a coffee shop on Fairview. I talked to the mayor previously about the coffee shop on Main, and he was more than kind enough to give me all the information on the previous people. And then I was told, no, we're not interested in renting it. But then a couple months later, it was rented. Actually, Fairview's better. It's got more character. It's got more style to it. And I'm still interested, and I have some other associates. I kind of delayed it a little bit for my health condition because my people wanted to do financing. Wanted to make sure I have somebody step in line if something happens to me that could take it over successorship before I even started 100%. Then the most recent thing is I've been offered potential licensing on my paper, which is kind of funny considering my paper's only been samples out there. But it came to the knowledge how much work I did on distributing it. So a couple publishers in a publishing house, I talked to them and they said, well, you do this, do that. They offered me dollars, and I said, I really don't have anything to sell. Appreciate the compliment, right? And it was a nice amount of cash. But what I did talk to them about is the potential of what is the industry doing with the newspaper industry. The newspaper industry subscriptions have, since COVID, went from 22 to 47% increase in subscriptions. My interest most recently is the messed up, filthy, dirty, disgusting looking newspaper boxes that are at the train station. I thought it'd be a nice way for me to contribute to Downers Grove some revenue. If initially it was misunderstood and by Michael, and he said that I was trying to put papers in there for sale. No. Downers Grove is very popular to a lot of people outside of Downers Grove. And they want recognition. Some major newspapers. They're willing to give stuff away because if you like the paper, you'll end up subscribing. Not only that, but the box is under need of repair. I was offering to pay money for it. I was asked if it couldn't be selling newspapers, so I said no, don't need to. They want to get their papers out there. They want to get their industry, the Irish American newspaper, the other papers. There's more papers that want to be in the area. And not only that, but the key location of that box that's rusty, dirty, nasty, and it kind of like a blight. I offered to get it insured, professionally maintained, and put some advertising on it. And advertising that would be, cover the revenue. And then I was told, you can put your newspapers in there, and I said, well, that's kind of hard to do because one day you've got this person in there, one day you got that person in there, the next day you got somebody putting labels in it, and it's revenue. To explore what kind of revenue? In both cases, the fermentation's revenue, and believe it or not, that box is revenue. Downtown Chicago are flipping in boxes around and putting lit up clip advertisement in the back of them, a couple of them with high traffic areas. You have thousands and thousands of people looking at the box, looking at the dirty sidewalks. And the last suggestion, since I'm in a bad mood anyways, is these restaurants that are out there, they need to clean their sidewalk. The train station, there's sections of the train station that it's really disgusting. I got pride in what I do, and I think we should pull back pride in what the city does. Set example. Have a nice evening. And the other thing is, from now on, instead of me making phone calls to City Hall, I'll have basically it's emailed and documented. That way there's a legal response.
Others? Subjects not on tonight's agenda. Okay. We will continue on then. Item 8 is our consent agenda. Is there a motion for the consent agenda?
Mayor, I move that the council adopt the consent agenda as presented.
Second.
All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Passes unanimously. Item 9 is our active agenda. This is the portion of the meeting where we intend to take up a subject on which we plan to take action tonight. These are subjects that we have talked about at least once before, sometimes many times before. With that, is there a motion concerning 902 Maple?
Mayor, I move that the council adopt an ordinance authorizing a special use for 902 Maple Avenue to permit construction of a 3-story multifamily building as presented.
Second.
Any audience comments or questions on this agenda item? Please.
Good evening. Al Davanskas on behalf of Aaron Holdings. I have with me, and I'd like to introduce Vitas Arnauskas, one of the owners. He'd like to just say a word. And then I'd like the architect. I think we've responded to your concerns and questions in terms of the guidelines, and the architect will present that. Okay. So Vitas.
Good evening, everyone. Vitas Arnauskas. I'm the owner of Aaron Holdings. Is developer of 902 Maple. I'll be really quick, wasn't planning to do a speech, not a big speech person, but I just want to tell mostly to the public, that we are not some sort of predatory developer who's not going to care about the site. Me personally, I lived in Downers Grove from 2005 till 2009 in 706 Maple. You probably really know this house. Unfortunately, we had to sell, but we really tried to save this house. We did a lot of work for our next owner, and this house looks really beautiful. So I love this town, and one of my brothers is planning to move in the top floor into this condo building, and just want to really quick say that we were here, we're listening to your opinions. We changed a lot of things, and very much, we are a friendly developer. We're just buying this to, and one of us moving in. Plain and simple. Thank you.
And I'd like to invite our architect, Simon Batistich, to present. You have the clickers right there.
Oh, okay. Yeah, as Al said, I'm Simon Batistich. I'm the architect on this project. I've been an architect for going on 40 years now. I've done other work with these owners before. And after listening to the planning and zoning, coming and listening to the mayor, commissioners, and staff, and especially the residents in the area, we went back and we tried to refine and revise the exterior of the building. So I put a quick PowerPoint together. Want to show you some of these revisions and some highlights from the design guidelines and kind of show how it applies. So that's just the cover of the design guidelines. This is the latest on the building, and I'll walk through it later, but it tried to address a lot of these issues we had talked about before, really trying to highlight the corner, getting some more offsets, trying to get some more rhythm to the building, the whole idea of massing. So we'll go through with the design, back to design guidelines, and this is the beginning of the design guidelines, and the main issue here is the bulk and the idea of massing of the building and trying to break it down into structural articulation. And so this is the next page of the design guidelines talking about design of the landscaping, and it should fit into the area. Things like a walkway from the street to the building and walkway from the street to the front porch. So here's our building, the latest rendition, which we've modified somewhat, and we follow those guidelines pretty closely. Yeah, we have the rhythm of the building. We have offsets, insets for the balconies. We have a covered front porch. We have a walkway from the public street to the front porch, which has seating on it, a communal area. The building itself was designed to open up the corner for the public and not to follow the street, but to actually bend away from that corner to create better sight lines and just a better presentation for the area. We moved the building as far as we could to the east, kept the parking over there and the garage doors to keep them out of sight. The guidelines go on again with the facades and the articulation, proportions, patterns, and the residential character. If you're in the downtown transitional district, which this building is, to really look at the residential character in small-scale parts of the building, like entry porches and small-scale windows. And so, again, with the building, we are following like a residential landscape. We have the corner has been articulated so it, again, defines that important corner of the village. We do have small-scale windows. We have, again, the covered front porch, which are more residential features. We follow the stone along the base. Most of the buildings along Maple have the old limestone foundations to them, which I think is important to follow on this building. Starting to get to some of the materials. Materials, typical building materials to the guidelines is natural brick and stone in buff, white, and cream colors. Dark colors are also appropriate according to the design guidelines. We talk about, again, the materials of natural brick and stone. Natural brick and stone. It comes back into fiber cement siding, vertical, horizontal siding are encouraged on the building. Again, just the idea of massing with the building and breaking up the flat facade with articulation of the windows. So that's what we did on the building. The building itself, along Maple, the long frontage of it, we immediately broke it into 3 separate pieces so it doesn't appear as one large building. Of those 3 separate pieces, we further broke it down to another 3 pieces of vertical, horizontal elements, insets, offsets, different materials, and all natural material. The vertical siding, which is a cement board siding, a hardy board, brick, and stone. Lighting, the lighting in the center, the gooseneck, that's what we have on the building. Very little lighting is on the building because it is residential. The only lighting that we have is over the garage and the walkway toward the back, beside the under canopy lighting in the front, and landscape wall washers, which wash up the building. A lot of importance in the design guidelines on the overall massing, the idea of inset, offset, some of the things we have talked about. So every point that's highlighted here in the guidelines, we can point to on our building. We really tried to match that. Corner articulation, quality materials, the balconies, inset balconies, forward-facing front porch. It's another idea of the massing, a building that's encouraged in the design guidelines. And our building is very similar, very similar feel to it, but much more residential because it's in a different neighborhood. It's not the downtown. So hopefully that gives you an overview of where we've come with this building. I think the final one here is really the one issue that was brought up a few times by all the commissioners, but Commissioner Davenport, with the importance of that corner, and we went back and tried to really look at that. The idea of the cornice, especially at the corner, should really be something that defines it and reaches to the sky, as the words are in the guidelines. And we think we've achieved that here with the building. Not only is the corner itself, that one element, it's designed as its own, but that whole massing of the corner and then the voids on the 2 sides with the balconies, and then the next element. So it reads as a larger corner. So it reads on different scales. So we feel it's been a successful, working within the guidelines, and again, working with the owners and what they're looking for out of this building. That's all. So if you have some questions or further clarification, we're happy to do it.
Thank you.
We also have with us Al Reganis, who's the president of Morris Engineering in Lisle and has been a Downers Grove resident on Benton for years and now is in Downers Grove Township. I don't believe there have been any sort of engineering issues that we haven't addressed, but he's available if we need. Okay, thank you.
Any other audience comments or questions? Council comments, questions? Mike?
I'll start us off.
Please.
During our last meeting, I really brought up 4, primary concerns with compliance with the downtown design guidelines that I did not feel were adequately addressed. And so if I go through those, we look at treating the Washington Street facade as also an important facade on this building. And the revised design, I think, has addressed that. We now have some balconies, we have some inset, and that structural articulation really wasn't there in the previous treatment. And then looking at that corner, I think the fact that we've asked for more articulation of that Washington Street facade actually led to that wrapping around that corner, and so I think that that's been addressed. Certainly the cornice was also an issue for me, and wanting a little bit something more happening there than what was previously shown, and we can see that that's been provided now as well. And then lastly, some sort of covered communal sort of gathering area, front porch-like, was another piece of the design guidelines that needed to be addressed, and I feel that that's been addressed now as well. So I think substantially, we look at the building design, downtown design guidelines, that the spirit of that has been met with the latest proposal, and for us to try to push it in any further direction, we start to creep into the style, and I understand that some people, this isn't their cup of tea, but that's not what we're here to really deliberate. We're looking for this special use permit and have the requirements of that been met, and I believe they have, so I intend to vote in favor of this proposal. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Leslie?
Yeah, I generally concur with Commissioner Davenport. There were just a couple of questions that I had, especially after speaking with some of the neighborhood. One, I know we talked about it last week, of the potential of putting the fence and the arborvitaes up on that north edge. So I just wanted to verify here at the meeting that is still...
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, we needed the confirmation from
Okay.
the neighbor, and the neighbor gave that confirmation.
Okay.
We will do that.
Excellent.
Again, we have the concern about the tree that exists in terms of the roots, but we will work with the neighbor on that.
Okay, wonderful, thank you. And kind of my only other question is, I mean, it's a little bit nitpicky, but because it is kind of bordering that residential neighborhood, and because that is part of the transition guidelines of having that landscaping, so just kind of maybe a little bit, especially on that Washington side, I do appreciate the balcony addition, but just really kind of making sure that we have a little bit of landscaping there. Ideally, I think it would be great to see if we could incorporate any native plantings, because those are a lot lower maintenance for you. That tends to be what I grow mostly in my front yard too, just to, again, kind of get that neighborhood feel, so I don't...
I think we have incorporated. Our concern is, and it's been raised by a number of residents, is the traffic issues at that corner. And so,
Sure.
So we're concerned about, the size of the trees or things like that. But
So I wasn't even necessarily thinking of trees, more
Yeah.
perhaps just planters or you know what I mean, something like
Okay.
that to kind of incorporate that more residential
Yeah,
feel.
that's something that we'll take a look at.
Yeah,
Thanks.
just a consideration. And then I feel like we asked this question, I'm not still, this is going to be condos with an HOA, correct? So essentially, when we're thinking about maintaining the permeable pavers, all of that, that's kind of all going to be
This
considered
will,
within
it's,
that HOA.
will be a condominium building with a homeowners association, and we're providing that for the first 2 years, the developer is responsible for the landscaping if anything goes.
Yes,
And then after
yeah.
that, the association will take on that responsibility.
And the same will be true for, like the permeable pavers and all of that kind of maintenance
Yeah,
as well.
because it's the whole
Sure.
common areas.
Okay, thank you so much.
Okay.
All right. That's it, Mayor.
Thank you. Anyone else? Greg?
Thank you, Mayor. I want to start by thanking my colleagues for all the comments over the last couple of times that this has been discussed. I happen to have missed both times that this has been on the agenda previously. And due to the feedback from my colleagues, this has gone from a project that I would not have voted for to a project that I intend to vote for. The changes to the corner in particular and the Washington Street facade, I think, are of significant importance. The additional articulation, bringing it into what I believe is substantial compliance with the design guidelines, it really, I think, brought it over the finish line for me. So this, suffice to say that this is not a question necessarily of historic preservation because of the voluntary nature of the ordinance that was discussed last week. The traffic concerns, I think, here are minimal. There could be significantly more impactful uses that would and could be built by right. The building is a significant step down from, say, the residential that's across the street in the DB zone. And I believe the special use criteria are met here in 2812-050H. This is obviously expressly authorized as a special use in the district. The proposed use is necessary or desirable to provide a service or facility that's in the interest of public convenience, and I believe it does contribute to the general welfare. And it will not, in this particular case, be detrimental to the health, safety, or general welfare of persons residing or working in the vicinity. It's multifamily residential it's zoned for this purpose. It's in a residential neighborhood. I think all of the criteria are met. Is it exactly the building I would design? No, but that's where the staying away from style and talking about the design guidelines really hits the road. So this is one that I think could have been a very close question, and it's closer than I think maybe some might have liked, but at the end of the day, it gets over the finish line of substantial compliance with the zoning code and the design guidelines. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Anyone else? Chris?
Yeah, I don't want to repeat what's been said. I want to thank Commissioner Davenport for articulating a lot of what I think many of us up here were thinking about, probably due to your professional experience, helpful. I also agree with Commissioner Jose. I think what was first here is not something I was interested in supporting, but I think not only thanks to the council, but also thanks to the public input to some of that. As I said last time, this building is what can be built here by right is very different than what we are seeing. Smaller footprint. I think a lot of, again, what we've asked for in terms of the massing has been clearly altered in I think a much more positive way. So I intend to support this. I do appreciate the developers and the architects' efforts here to come to a compromise in some ways. And I think the last thing I'll just say is this is the first time we've kind of put our downtown design guidelines, certainly specific to the transition zone, to use. And I think while it has very good bones, I think we have some opportunities to maybe look at that and decide how impactful we want them to be. I think there's some clarity, which I brought up last time in terms of how it discusses the different zones, but also I think some of the interpretation may be a little more subjective than I would like. So while I do think they have all been met, I think this is an opportunity for us to reflect moving forward on how these design guidelines can be better and how we want to use them. But based on the changes, I intend to support this. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Martin?
Thank you, Mayor. Most of my colleagues have already said what I was going to say, and I said an awful lot last time. So the mechanical nuts and bolts criteria, I think we established previously, are met here. In fact, they're not requesting any particular treatment, variations or exceptions, and this is not even as dense or as large as it could be. And I do want to emphasize that what could go here other than this, without this kind of discussion and community involvement, would be probably considerably more intensive use of the property, which reminds me of other situations where the neighborhood said, well, we don't want X here, and then that went away and Y came, and then they ran back to us and said, can we please have X back? That's happened more than once. So I think this is actually, not only does it meet the nuts and bolts criteria, But if you go back to when the last time the zoning for this parcel was changed, this is kind of what was contemplated in terms of, it's less than what was contemplated back then, which is something that weighs very heavy on me. I'm actually glad that the zoning changes that were done years ago have actually delivered something less intense and less dominating than it would have been before those changes. I ordinarily don't like to talk about things that even approach legislating style. That's not the way I'd like to roll, because most of us, if we wanted to build a house on our property in a certain style, whether it was Victorian or Foursquare or whatever you want to build, you wouldn't expect your neighbors to say, we don't want your style in this neighborhood, so you can't build your house. I think most of us would be pretty upset if that was the case. But here, this is a very particular situation, and I rarely use the phrase "in this particular case" from 2812-050H, which Commissioner Jose very aptly referred to. But this was a little bit different because it's probably very, not probably, I think it's very unique given where it's situated in downtown transition, with the design guidelines applicable and within what is potentially a historic district and maybe someday still will be. So that, to me, I thought deserved more scrutiny and more deeper application of the design guidelines. I also appreciate Commissioner Davenport's ability to articulate these things and perhaps what we were thinking, but in a more professionally articulate way. So thank you. I also just have to echo my colleagues in saying that and I wasn't here on the meeting when this came up first reading on April 9th of 2024, but I went back and looked at the picture on April 9th of 2024, and what we're looking at on May 21st of 2024 is remarkably different. So if anyone had any doubts that the conversation and the communications and the input and the discussion didn't actually have a meaningful effect, they would be wrong, because it did. And we're not talking about the height and the size and the fact that something's going there, because that was really something that was allowed from the get-go. But the way it fits in the neighborhood has been significantly altered, and I too thank the neighbors and the public for their input, my colleagues for the discussion up here, but also the developers for working with everybody to make May 21st, 2024 very different than April 9th, 2024. And again, I'm not all about legislating style or color or things like that. I think that's an overstep, and I fundamentally then do agree that while I might choose violet instead of purple, that's not what we're here to do. This does substantially meet the design guidelines and overall meets the criteria for special use under our code. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Anyone else? Last comments?
Yeah, no one has an opportunity to talk. It was
It was.
totally breezed over.
No, it wasn't.
He asked twice.
All right, everybody's, hang on.
Simple fix.
Okay, couple things, guys. I know this is important, and so we'll take some public comments. Breezed over. This meeting has been run exactly the same as every meeting on this subject and every other development subject for the last 5 years. Many of the faces in this room have been at those meetings. It's not new, the process. If people were doing other things, I can't really help that. We will, after I see if my colleagues have anything else to say, because I know this is very important, and I'm certain many of you came here for this purpose, we'll take a few additional comments from the podium. But guys, come on. These meetings aren't new. It's exactly the way they've been run every time. So, are there any other council comments on this subject? Okay. We will go back. We're here to serve you guys, and we'd like to have you to have the opportunity to give your input to the meeting. So, let's roll through this. Anybody with comments on this agenda item, please come on down to the podium.
My name is Rebecca Edelman. I'm from the Whittier community. As Bob can attest, and anyone else in this area, in this this room, crossing that intersection is a rite of passage for like every kid in the Whittier community. Like, it's the first time they get to tell their mom and dad, like, I'm doing it, I'm growing up, I'm going down on my own. Last night at 9:30, that intersection saw its 13th accident of the year from 2024. 5 months, 13 accidents. we're putting more traffic there. We're shutting down more line sites. It's dangerous, it's unnecessary, and it really, really scares the community for what's coming next with Fairview. Thanks.
I'm sorry, that was breezed over, and we were all debating, what happened? So we are all here to deny the use for a special use permit for 902. 902 was originally residential until legal maneuvers changed it to business use, and now DT transition. This history shows a pattern of disregarding the community's preferences. Downers Grove gets its name from Pierce Downer, who came from New York in 1832. In 1864, the Burlington and the Quincy came through and helped to create growth. In 1873, local leaders finally gave their home a name, Downers Grove. So much rich history. And it's a fine time to get up right now and talk. You've had 5 months. We've never seen you once, but sitting in that chair. These historical families built a community around the Grove. The Grove has been gone. I ask of you to put the Grove back into Downers. Preservation is the future. And I know you don't all see that. Gidis Arnauskas could have repurposed 902, but instead chose the money. Gidis Arnauskas chose not to get up here and speak to the community, but chose destruction and demolition at a historically significant home. I live across the street, was 843 Maple. When owners Gordon and Jane Barrow passed away, we couldn't sleep at night because we knew what was coming. And tonight, we knew what was coming as well. But fortunately, one man came along and he saved Jane and Gordon's home. We are all eternally grateful for that man to save that home. Gidis Arnauskas wants to destroy history and build a mini Dash. Why? We just got through with the Dash, the Marquee, Maple and Main. This is a really dangerous corner. We were right there last night, heard the crunching of metal, and another one on Mother's Day. We went over to make sure everybody was okay in that accident. Tell us that your densification is a good idea. As a community, we get sucker punched every single time, not being aware of what's coming. This will be the last time many of us will ever get sucker punched, ever, as the majority did not know 902 was slated for demolition as we visited the community. So many people are downtrodden with your council in this community due to overdevelopment, congestion, and not being heard. I ask of you to embrace the community and you will be embraced back. Shun the community and you will be shunned for the rest of your days, and you included.
I'm just going to address one thing that I heard tonight. So the owner has said that he loves this town, that he's lived in this town, that this is a great town, all that craziness. But then, and if that's the case, then why would you come in to one of the most historic parts of this town, and instead of preserving the style, preserving the historic nature of it, why would you build a modern building? Why would you encroach upon that property? Why would you do that? That's my question. It doesn't seem like there's a good answer for that, but here we are sitting watching it happen, and I just, it makes me sick, but that's all I have to say.
Hi, Christine Martin. I was asked to read something from someone. We all know how you're going to vote because you do tell people things, and that person told us that we know how you're going to vote. And we suspected that, we knew that, and I know that, Chris, you took offense at the words done deal,
Yeah.
but we're used to it, and it's a done deal, and that's how it goes every single time. So this is from a resident. I cannot understand why the village, rich in history, would demolish a historic structure of any kind. However, aside from loss of another beautiful historic property in our town, what really bothers me is the lack of respect board members have shown for the residents of the community they serve. While I do not know her, I find the plight of Miss Katie Callahan not only to be saddening, but alarming. I cannot understand how any municipality would allow a structure to be built that would cause detriment to another taxpayer's property. From what I've heard, the building proposed at 902 Maple would have significant negative impact on Ms. Callahan's foundation if built. If this is allowed to go on, how long will it be until the board allows other structures impacting neighboring property owners to be built? Why is the board allowing construction projects to move forward that will more than likely cause detriment to the neighboring properties? I have been a resident of Downers Grove for over 20 years, and prior to this, I truly believed our village board was there to protect us from projects. This, Miss Callahan purchased her home in the hopes to live there a long time, and the fact that she may have to relocate due to the project is more than enough reason to vote no. I fear if this trend continues, people who have worked all their lives will be displaced due to the damage these structures do. As our main body and govern, I feel the board not only has responsibility, but an obligation to vote no on this proposal. I truly hope you make the right choice. And when you make the choice, think about how you would feel if you were Katie Callahan. That's significant. We're sick and tired of you not listening to the residents. We elect you, and you work for us. We pay taxes. And you're gonna mess with her whole life. Maybe she's just one person, but it honestly makes me think that this is me, it's not anything I've heard, that maybe there's money under the table. Because every single solitary time you vote yes, and you discard us completely. And it's Maple Avenue of all places. We're sick of it. I have no respect. None. Neither do any of them.
Good evening. I'm Katie Callahan. I live at 5211 Washington Street. So I wanted to address the pervious driveway and maintenance that is required for the proposed 902 Maple building. So the driveway design, my backyard is pitched higher to the east of 902 Maple. Where the driveway will be located. And the backyard runs towards the foundation to the back of my home. The pervious driveway must use permeable granite chips, not standard dirt, in order for the water to properly drain. If permeable granite chips are not used and standard dirt is used as a less expensive option, or if the layout is simply not maintained, there will be weeds and debris, and water will clog, and it will not be able to drain. So please consider the lifelong portion of this project and the constant maintenance that will be required over time if the property were to sell in the future or have new owners, or however the lifetime of that building would be. If there is a construction phase, I would like a special attention to be paid to the swale or ditch to divert water from my property to prevent flooding. I have never taken water in my basement or my home, and I would like to plan to protect my investment as best I can. Proper arrangement of the silt fence to keep dirt and debris from blowing into my property would be much appreciated. If the building completes, I would like to confirm that I want an arborvitae planting along the fence and also a fence on the side of the property to provide privacy for me and my home. As the developer stated in an email that was sent to me by their attorney, the developer will pay for the necessary reports before any site work commences for the 902 plot. A foundation structural survey and a water mitigation report will be arranged and carried out. In the future, if there's any damage to my property, I will communicate these changes with the village and the developer. I would also like the developer to put in writing or in an email to me the land that runs behind my home that was addressed on the east border of the 902 parcel was verbally gifted to me in the Planning Commission meeting on March 4th. So I would like to have that in writing so that I can protect the trees and the part of my land that was in concern. As I learn to cope with the possible changes near my home and the feelings that I have about Downers Grove, I do reflect the full block from Maple to Curtis and Washington to Belden have a lot of memories for me and my family and a lot of meaning. The excitement of purchasing my first home, beautiful Victorian era residence from 1911. Also, where my sister and brother-in-law are living a few houses away from me, raising my nieces and nephew. And also the same area where my father practiced orthodontics on the corner of Washington and Curtis for 54 years. There's emotions and attachment in my decision to relocate to 5211 Washington Street. If you know me, you've probably most likely been to my home in the winter months or sat outside with me in my backyard during the summer, because everyone is always welcome. As I encounter the possible challenges of the new construction, I'm convinced that there's nothing in this decision that will benefit me as part of an addition to the community that I was raised in. The only positive takeaway that I have carried with me is the support of my family and my neighbors. And I've gotten the chance to know them really well in the past few months. To these advocates, I thank you for your help and your consideration towards me and my investment in this community to assist and fight against overdevelopment in my neighborhood. I just wanted to say all those things. Those are really important to me. There's so much going through my mind right now, but I just wanted to state that. Thank you.
If I may, I guess everybody knows by now, I'm her sister. And Mr., I'm not going to get your name right, I'm sorry, the builder. You know, I understand you may say this isn't personal, it's business. I understand that, but if someone's home, you know, if it's not personal, I don't want to know about that home then. Your home is your most personal space. So I really hope that you take these things into consideration. And, you know, sometimes things are said and then they don't really end up happening. So please consider my sister in this. She deserves better. She's, you know, she's a good person. She's a single girl. This house has been, it's the biggest thing that ever happened to her. So please, when you're making your decisions, consider that there's a person involved in this. And to those of you council members that took the time to show up, we really appreciate it.
I find it interesting that a few of you mentioned that the building here is a matter of right, with a comment that it could be essentially so much worse, because the building that could be built there would be bigger, higher, what have you, as a matter of right. I think it's time to review the zoning for this area and make appropriate changes. We now know what the zoning allows for Maple Avenue when it comes to Dash and the Marquee and Maple on Main and the entire wall there that is makes the whole area claustrophobic, in my opinion, and way too close and no green space. And so there is a comprehensive plan from 2017. It was implemented. It doesn't work. People don't like it. It is not a homey residential area that we've all learned, all love for our homes. You need to take another look at it, revise it. It isn't cast in stone. It isn't a proclamation of divine right. And I think you need to look at it and scale it back and make sure that the things that can be built here are warm and attractive and welcoming and homey, because this stuff isn't. And it is telling when you say it could be worse. Thank you.
Good evening, members of the council. My name is Forrest Moberg, and I have proudly called Downers Grove my home for the past 30 years. Tonight I'm here to express my deep concerns about the proposed development and urge a delay in the final vote to allow for a more thorough review. Firstly, I want to highlight the significant procedural errors, and it's disheartening that Commissioner Jose has changed his mind so quickly after not being here for 2 meetings. I find that interesting, but regardless, unlike other developments, there have been no public meetings or neighborhood consultations about this proposal. The lack of engagement contradicts the recommendations made at the Planning Commission meeting and undermines the transparency and inclusivity that our community expects and deserves. Several commissioners have raised valid concerns about the project's nonconformance with our downtown design guidelines, specifically regarding mass, bulk, articulation, and residential character, who I happen to agree with. The guidelines clearly state that the new development is downtown transitional district should maintain the appearance of buildings with residential character through small-scale development and appropriate design features. This proposed development fails to meet these criteria in several ways. Mass and bulk. The building's size and flat roof design do not harmonize with the adjacent residential buildings, many of which have pitched roofs. This discrepancy creates a jarring visual contrast that detracts from the neighborhood's historical charm. Articulation and detailing. As a corner lot, this building requires additional articulation and elaboration to enhance in visual appeal and integration with the surrounding area. The current designs do not sufficiently break up the building's mass or incorporate enough architectural features to create the desired visual interest. Residential character. The guidelines emphasize maintaining residential character through elements like entry porches, landscaped front yards, and small windows. The proposed building design does not adequately reflect these elements, making it incompatible with the neighbor's existing aesthetics. Moreover, the recent modifications made to the building design, such as adding balconies and limestone surrounds, seem rushed and insufficient. As noted by the mayor, these changes appear as afterthoughts rather than genuine improvements that align with the community's vision. This underscores the need for a more thorough and considered approach, which can only happen with a proper reevaluation by the Planning Commission. Additionally, the potential impact of the demolition and construction on our neighborhood safety, noise levels, and traffic has not been adequately outlined or discussed. We, the residents, deserve a clear understanding of how these critical aspects will be managed. It is crucial that before any further action is taken, the council ensures a detailed plan addressing these concerns is not only presented but scrutinized for its adequacy and effectiveness. Given these substantial concerns and the procedural errors identified, I respectfully request that the council delay the final vote and send the project back to the Planning Commission for a more thorough review. This review should include proper community engagement, adherence to design guidelines, and detailed planning to ensure that any development is truly in the best interest of Downers Grove. I understand that some people seem to have their minds already made up before hearing anybody speak, and we all know we're here to speak tonight, so appreciate your time.
Glenn Hoffman, Downers Grove resident for 7 years on Maple Avenue. I did not intend to speak tonight, and Mayor, I did hear you say, is there any public comments, but it was amidst a lot of other verbiage pretty quickly, and I think it just didn't get heard. Through this whole process, I think we could probably take some lessons away. Several council members mentioned that this was the first time the transitional elements had actually been imposed or utilized, I guess you should say. Maybe we could go back because obviously there's been so much community involvement with this one. I don't think you want to be sitting there hearing all this backlash on, what would be good for the community and what would not be good. So I think we have an opportunity here to go back to the drawing board a little bit on what is transitional. This particular corner was ultra sensitive, and I get that. You have an honorary historic district. You've got 2024 construction across the street. So not an easy thing to do, but I think that, this can be a learning opportunity. Thanks.
Marshall Schmidt, 4923 Sealy. I've been a resident of Downers Grove for most of the last 50 years, and I think many of you know how I feel about overdevelopment in Downers Grove. But I want to address some procedural issues here that I think are very problematic. And I want to echo what the previous speaker said two speakers ago regarding sending this back to the Planning Commission. At the last meeting, it was pointed out the Planning Commission rejected this. And the reality is that there's nothing in the report that the village staff has presented to you that specifically addresses the concerns that the village council raised at the last meeting. You can see they've changed the corner, which was one of the concerns that was raised. But the report that the staff presented basically said all the design criteria were met as is shown by the report or the vote at the March 4th meeting, the report that was submitted. But we know that it's changed, right? So the question of whether this meets the design criteria has not been considered by the Planning Commission, and whether this board is bound by that Planning Commission or not, it is really good government for the Planning Commission to reconsider proposals like this so that everything can be taken into account. And secondly, I'd like to dispel a little bit of a myth. I've heard the village council on several occasions state that the property owner has the right to do this. They don't. The reason we're here is because they need a special use. And one of the criteria in determining whether to grant a special use is whether the design criteria are met. And I find it troubling that we're now kind of retreating to, it's the property owner's right to do this. It is not the property owner's right to do this. The reason a special use is required is because the zoning does not permit this, because it's a multifamily project. And so what I'm saying is, if you're going to follow the rules, you need to acknowledge and internalize the notion that you are making a decision to grant a special use that is outside of the zoning requirements. And I encourage you in doing that to make sure that you take into account not only the neighborhood comments, which a neighborhood meeting might not be necessary for this, but it will be necessary to allow public comment at a planning commission. So there are mechanisms to allow public comment, and one of those mechanisms is before the planning commission, and if you decide it tonight and approve this, you're circumventing that. So when people say that you're not listening, and you say, well, but we don't have to have a neighborhood meeting, that's disingenuous, because you are preventing further comment and further consideration. So I would strongly encourage you to send this back to the Planning Commission, let them consider this revised plan, let the public comment in that venue at that time, and see how it all plays out. I really encourage you to do that. I think the number of people who have come to these meetings and the passion with which they've expressed themselves show that it's very important that this body do all it can to listen. And one of the things that it can do to listen further is to send it back to the Planning Commission. Thank you.
Others? Okay. Just want to make sure everybody's had a chance. All right, any additional comments from the council? Mike?
Just a quick question maybe for the architect and engineer. What type of foundation is being proposed for the building? Will it be any deeper than what you typically expect for?
Residential.
Gotta come up to the mic.
It's just a standard residential foundation.
So
9 feet.
10 feet down?
Correct.
What you'd typically have underneath a house that was going on the site?
Yeah, that's
Maybe
correct. And
wider
actually,
footings, but otherwise no deeper.
Since on the east you're up high, on the side toward Colleen, we're actually going to be only about 6 feet down because of the grade drop.
Right. So, very good. Thank you.
Okay.
Anything else? Martin?
I've just got to address a few things. Substantial changes have been made to this proposal based on public comment. And this was first reading or workshop twice?
Yes.
Is that right? So we've actually had more meetings about this, more public meetings about this than most projects. When we say that, just to correct something, when we say something can be built as right, we didn't say this could be built as right. Let's be very clear about that. So there are other things that could be built as right, which might be more intensive than this. That was the statement. Let's be very clear about that. Number two, I was the one who suggested potentially sending this back to the Plan Commission, but it is the obligation, and in our code, which I know some people know very well, we have to be very specific direction to the Plan Commission. So it's not just to go here and talk about it. We have to go tell them, go do this. So I changed my mind because rather than doing that and then having come back, this is the decision-making body here. The Plan Commission is not the decision-making body. So this is where those do this actually should happen and did happen. We've already, and I can't say anything better than Commissioner Davenport, but a lot of things happen. Now, if there's any question that the changes that have been presented to us are not going to happen, that can be ruled out immediately because exactly what was presented is going to be built. I don't think there's any question about that. So what else can I say as long as we're talking about procedural things? The last thing I'll just say, please, Maple Avenue, please consider historic preservation and voluntarily landmarking your homes.
Second that.
I have begged people in that neighborhood to do that. I have begged people in this community to do that. If you want to see houses like this be preserved, you have the ability to do it. You have since 2007? And it's been even easier since 2015. I have personally worked with people in the audience to encourage people to landmark their homes. They have landmarked their homes, and then the home will be there. So please, if this does anything for the neighborhood, please use it as leverage to convince your neighbors to consider voluntarily landmarking, because that's how you keep Maple Avenue the way it is today. And there are organizations like the Friends of the Edwards House that will help you do that if you have any issues. Just please, that's how you can take your future in your own hands, and to the extent that you want to avoid something like this happening, that's how you do it. But it takes the property owner to do it. All of you are property owners. You have rights to your property. You would not expect your neighbors to tell you how to run your property. But if you want to make sure that your property, after you sell it, is going to be protected, you have the means to do that. It could not be easier. And Maple Avenue has so many homes that qualify, and you even have the opportunity to voluntarily seek a historic district, either thematic or, what's the other one, contiguous, or, yes?
Yes.
Please, I beg of you, you have that power. You don't, I would be happy to vote for that. That's all I will say, because it does concern me that we're losing historic homes in the community, but we have a way to do something about that. So please consider that. That's all I'll say. End of public service announcement.
Mayor? Sorry.
No, go ahead, Mike.
I just want to add on to the PSA, you know, there were also comments made about taking a look at our comprehensive plan, taking a look at the zoning, revisiting, guiding DG. I mean, that's what we're engaged in right now, is asking the community to update our comprehensive plan in all elements about it. So please, get involved. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. First, I kept up on the discussion the same way a lot of people do, by watching it on YouTube. And I could watch it and rewatch it to my heart's content. Second, a little bit of a history lesson on this property. It, until 2017, was actually zoned downtown business. And it was rezoned to downtown transition, which actually kind of cut the building from what you might have seen over across the street at Dash to what you're looking for over here, or what you're looking at over here. Yeah, the reality is that process took 18 months, give or take. I mean, the council went a good 14, 15 rounds on what should the downtown look like, what are the bounds, where should the transition start, and this particular property was discussed multiple times in an effort to decide, when does the transition start and how do we get down to the residential neighborhood. And keeping it to a building of this size and this impact is exactly what the council had in mind at that particular time. So, and thank you. All of this was done with input from the neighbors. The property owners at that time and others in the neighborhood were integral parts of those conversations over, like I said, 18 months. Now, residents move. New residents move in. And additional feedback is always taken. But the last time the comprehensive plan was redone in 2017, this is what the council envisioned with the input of the community. And if those expectations have changed, as was said, we're in the middle of creating a new comprehensive plan. But for the time being, this fits the zoning code. This fits the special use criteria. Not everybody necessarily has to think it's the greatest building ever, but it fits. Thank you, Mayor.
Who else? I'm not going to repeat my colleagues. I generally agree with them. But a couple of things I think are worthy of some comment. We talk about traffic. I'm pretty familiar with the traffic on Maple Avenue. And there's a lot of traffic on Maple Avenue. Yeah, that's right. There is. 8,000 cars a day going back 10 years at least. And this use is likely the most minimal traffic use that you could put on that site. If you put on that site a commercial property as it is right now, if somebody buys that building and rehabs that building to use it as offices, there's likely coming and going. There's at least 4 office units available in that building. There's people coming and going. A residential site usually has a couple of trips during the day. That's one thing. The second thing is the traffic is all going to come out of one driveway on the east end, which is removed from the intersection. It makes those interactions easier to manage and easier to predict for the traffic that's there. Every car that drives down that street is difficult for every person that lives on that street. That's just an absolute fact. There is no two ways about it. It's a tough street to live on. But putting a residential use in a residential neighborhood with less curb cuts, there just isn't any scenario where that's more impactful to traffic than a commercial use. There just isn't one. we can't just throw out the word traffic because we think that that piggybacks on an existing problem. Yeah, traffic's tough there, there's no question about it, but it's not made worse by a couple of residences on there. Stormwater is another one that's thrown out every time we have a conversation. Stormwater rules in this town have gotten progressively more stringent over the last 20 years. Every council, every mayor, every staff for the last 20 years has made them progressively more stringent. If you look at this plan, they are more stringent. There is on-site storage in this plan. There are connections to the existing properties to the west or to the east and to the north that, if anything, should be slightly more directive in that surface flow. That's what's in here. Now, could there be an engineering mistake? You bet, absolutely. But what's put in here should be an improvement in the stormwater conditions. Maybe you don't understand that or believe it, but it's in the engineering. It's not like somebody just up here just said, well, we kind of hope it'll be better. There's an engineering design. It's available in the plans. You can take a look at it. There's storage on site, and there's grading that is going to make the direction of that storage more effective. That's true of every development that goes on in town, guys. It just is. We can look back to 1973 to 1993 and wish that somebody had done something different, sure, because there's a lot of problems in Downers Grove from stormwater. There's no question about that. But the facts of the last 20 years are clear. They are better. And lastly, it's been touched on by my colleagues in various ways, but I want to address this. You don't listen to us and you're not doing what we want. What we're doing is we're following the law. That's what we're doing. We do not legislate homey. We do not legislate harmonize. We do not legislate building color. We just don't. Maybe we should. To Mike's point, we're having these meetings, we're taking input, everybody come tell us we should legislate color and homey. But we don't right now. It is not fair or reasonable for this site or my site or Greg's house for some neighborhood to say, we don't like the design of your house. Drive around town and find the number of locations where there is a modern house next to an old house, where there is a postmodern next to a, I don't know, Victorian, where there is a split-level ranch right by a Cape Cod. Maple Avenue is great. I chose to live there. I get Maple Avenue. My house is 1857. I clearly have an affinity for that. But Maple Avenue has at least 5 homes along that same side of the street that are nowhere close to that. They're just not. It's part of the reason the district there would be so difficult, because there are so many spaces along there that are not consistent with a historic district. Martin's advice is the best in the room tonight. There is a vehicle in place by which people can protect their homes. You should do it if it's important to you. That's the best advice that we've heard this evening, frankly. It really is, because it's doable. But what this council and everyone before has said is we're not interested in forcing people to do that. And I can only speak for me in the moment. Maybe we'll take it up at our guiding DG. I'm still not interested in forcing anyone to protect their house. But everybody has a chance to do it. I'd encourage everyone to do it. I agree with all my colleagues' comments about this specific project and the changes to this point. I also plan to support this. If there's anything else from the council, we'll take it. Otherwise, Rosa, please call the roll.
Commissioner Jose?
Aye.
Commissioner Sadowski-Fugit?
Aye.
Commissioner Davenport?
Aye.
Commissioner Tully?
Aye.
Commissioner Glover?
Aye.
Commissioner Gilmartin?
Aye.
Mayor Barnett?
Aye. That motion passes unanimously. Item 10 on our agenda is the first reading. This is the portion of the meeting where we're taking up items for the first time. These are items on which we do not plan to take action this evening. We'll wait a couple of seconds since it looks like people are clearing out. All right, Dave, over to you.
Thank you, Mayor Barnett. There are 2 items on tonight's first reading agenda. The first is consideration of an ordinance that would amend sections of our liquor code. And here to present this item is our village attorney, Enza Petrarca.
Thank you, Dave. The first item is an ordinance amending our Liquor Control Act to increase the number of the wine boutique license and the brew facility license. This will accommodate requests from businesses to open new establishments within the village. Happy to answer any questions, Mayor.
Any comments or questions from the audience on this item?
Yes, it's being done to accommodate requests from businesses to open new establishments within the village. Yes, for wine boutiques and brew facilities.
Got a question, please come down to the podium so that people watching on YouTube TV like Greg next week can hear it. Council comments or questions?
I have a question, Mayor.
Chris, please.
Just to be clear, we have met the number that we allow currently, and we have interest in new establishments opening, and therefore we would have to add the number.
Correct. We've received requests for a brew facility license, and we
Okay.
currently do not have any available.
Okay.
And same with a wine boutique license.
Fantastic. Thank you. I'm all for it.
Martin?
Yeah, thank you. So a little bit more context for this. When these two new liquor license categories were created, I don't know, 10 years ago, more or less, we started baby steps, and we only created a couple just because we wanted to see how it went, because you don't want to create a bunch of licenses that aren't used. It just creates more issues in the municipal code and administrative issues. But as time has gone on, there's been more desire for businesses to locate in Downers Grove that utilize these licenses. We've basically run out of licenses. So what we're doing is creating some additional licenses so that we can facilitate further businesses opening up in our community for uses that are popular and the community likes. So that's really what this is. It's just increasing the number of licenses so that more businesses can apply for them. The key thing to understand is that all this does is allow for the business to apply for the license. They still have to go through all the hoops in order to get the license. This just means they have the ability to apply. So I'm all support of encouraging more economic vitality in our community.
Anyone else? Okay.
Thank you, Mayor. The second item on tonight's first reading agenda is consideration of an ordinance authorizing a special use for an accessory structure for the property at 3928 Morton Avenue. And our Community Development Director, Stan Popovich, has additional information on this petition.
Thank you, Manager Fieldman. Good evening, Mayor and Council. As Manager Fieldman noted, this special use for 3928 Morton Avenue. The property is located in the northwestern portion of the village, North Ogden Avenue. Property is located at the southwest corner of the intersection of Morton and Herbert. As you can see on this graphic here, there's two lots. The north lot has a house on it. The south lot is currently vacant. In the arrow, you can see a former shed on there that's since been removed. That was in deteriorating conditions. Again, this is the plat of survey. Again, the shed on the south has been removed, the current existing one. What the petitioner is requesting is to build a new shed on the second lot. Here's a picture of the new shed. Because it's an accessory structure on a separate lot prior to the principal structure, a special use is required. Comp plan notes that it's single-family detached residential. The shed is a typical accessory use. Planning Commission found that the standards for special use were met and recommended approval at their May 6th meeting. I'm happy to answer any questions. The petitioner is here as well tonight if you have any questions for them. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Stan. Any audience comments or questions? Council comments or questions? Mike?
Just a quick one. If this property were to be sold, would the accessory structure then need to be removed?
Yes.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Martin?
We apply standards to every project the same, whether it's a shed or whether it's a building in the corner, 902 Maple. So this one's really easy under the special use standards of 2812-050H. And the only reason we even have it is because normally you can't build an accessory structure by itself on a lot. One solution would be to combine the lots and solve that, but that's a whole other story. Basically, this is replacing an existing shed with a better shed. So it's certainly in compliance with our village policies. It's something that applies as an allowed special use, while the comprehensive plan doesn't specifically go to this level, it's certainly not inconsistent with it, or the downtown design guidelines do not apply here, so that's not an issue. And certainly, we like to support people utilizing their property in the best way they can. Fortunately, you don't have a bunch of neighbors who are very upset about your shed who are here tonight. I don't see any reasons to put any conditions on this. The main criteria is that this is a proposed use that's expressly authorized as a special use. Yes, it is. It is necessary and desirable and will contribute to the general welfare of the neighborhood. I'm sure it's both necessary and desirable for the petitioner as well as other people who would rather see your lawn equipment in a shed rather than sitting out under a tarp. And in this particular case, because it's replaced the existing structure with a better structure, certainly in no stretch of the imagination could be detrimental to the health, safety, or general welfare of persons residing or working in the vicinity or be injurious to property values and improvements in the vicinity. So in short, meets all the criteria.
Chris?
Yeah, just a question, is the new shed going exactly where the old shed was?
No, the new shed is shown here in gray. The old shed was a square. It's a little bit south to the bottom of the screen there. There's a little square right in this area right there. That's where the old shed is.
And where the location for the new shed would be meets our setback standards?
Correct.
Perfect. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Anyone else? We're all probably wishing for a little levity in the moment. But in seriousness, one of the things that we all take pretty seriously into heart is that we treat every property owner with the same degree of respect, and we make the assumption that every property owner has the same right to ask for whatever and be considered, given the same consideration and same consideration process.
Yes.
That's what's taking place here. It may feel like a smaller deal to some, but it's pretty important for any government entity to have that as maybe their highest standard. The fact that they treat every person that comes to them with the same process and the same level of respect and the same level of consideration, and we do that. It doesn't mean the results are always what everyone likes, but this is that same process playing out that we just had. Anyone else? Thanks. Thanks, Dave.
That ends our first reading tonight, Mayor. Thank you.
Stan, you sat down. I thought you disappeared. All right, attorney's report.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. 2 items tonight. The first is an ordinance increasing the number of brew facility and wine boutique liquor licenses, and the second is an ordinance authorizing a special use to permit construction of an accessory structure before the principal structure is established at 3928 Morton Avenue. Thank you, Mayor. That is all.
Thank you. There's no mayor report tonight. Council member reports. Mike.
Sure. So wanted to say congrats to all our high school graduates and 8th graders and their families. The high school graduation ceremonies took place on May 19th, and the 8th grade promotions are coming up on May 28th. And graduation was something I really look forward to every year when I was on the District 99 school board, and it seems strange not to be a part of the festivities this year. It's such a wonderful time of reflection and excitement about new beginnings. And so I want to wish best of luck to all of our high school graduates and soon-to-be high school freshmen, and to the families and parents of the graduates as well. That's all, Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you. Danny.
No report, Mayor.
Leslie.
Thank you, Mayor.
I just want to put in a plug. So Pride Month is coming up, and EQDG is going to be hosting Pride Fest 2024 on Saturday, June 8th from 12 to 3 p.m. In event of rain, it'll be held at the Lincoln Center, so they'll have music, food truck, people and pets costume contest and parade, crafts, tie-dyeing, face painting, a photo booth, community organization booth, and I appreciate this as a parent of a neurodivergent child. They will also have a sensory tent available. That's all, Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you. Martin.
Mayor, the excitement is almost unbearable. T-minus 30 days until Rotary Grow Fest. I'm speechless. Thank you.
Now that never happens. Chris.
T-minus 32 days to when I'm flushing 2 goldfish down the toilet that my kids want for breakfast. That's it, Mayor. Thank you.
I can't top that.
I got a story about that for some other time.
We all do.
Dave, we have a manager's report. We have 2 items.
Save the goldfish.
We do, Mayor. If it's all right with you, I can handle both of those in the committee room.
Okay, we'll do that then. So one of them is likely to be a little bit of a discussion, guiding DG environmental sustainability. The other is an update, but as managers just asked, we're going to take both of those in the committee room. So about 10 minutes or so, we'll reconvene next door. You're all welcome to join us. All right, reconvene back in here. Village manager has a couple of items tonight. We're going to pick up where we left off and turn the meeting over to Dave.
Thank you, Mayor Barnett. Under the manager's report tonight, we'll give a quick update on priority action items. Then we'll see a video showing progress on our Civic Center project. And then we'll move into an update on our guiding DG series of plans, where we'll hear an update on those plans from partner and principal at Houseville Levine, Josh Kuntz. And then a discussion of our environmental sustainability plan, where we will do three things. One, we're going to get to know our new staff member, Jason Michnick, and we'll get to know a new addition to our team, a sub-consultant, Jay Womack from GZA. Then we'll get to know a little bit more about what Jason has been doing here and what he's accomplished as part of our team in his first 4 months. And then really the highlight of this portion of the meeting is where we get to hear the council talk about what you'd like to see in the environmental sustainability plan. It's a lot to cover. It's getting a little late, so I'll be very brief in our update on priority action items. Each year, as part of the long-range plan, the Village Council establishes action items that are in support of the goals of the long-range plan. They are shown in the plan here. The ones in yellow are the ones that we're working on right now. 4 of them have been completed, and frankly have been completed for a couple of updates now. There's been no change there. This is an overview of each of the projects using the simple green, yellow, red demarcation. This has not changed since our last update. All of the projects in green are on schedule and on scope and proceeding. The Meadowbrook project, where we're working with that developer to rejuvenate that center and use the tax increment financing to do it, continues to be shown in yellow due to schedule. They are still proceeding. They are working through our zoning application process and the entitlement process through DuPage County, especially as it relates to 63rd Street. So that remains yellow. It's still moving ahead. It's just running a little bit slower, or quite a bit slower, frankly, than we had hoped. So it's still proceeding. If you're interested and want to do a deeper dive online under the agenda materials, you'll see the slideshow presentation posted. Each project has a slide that looks like this that tells you recent steps and next steps. Due to the interest of time tonight, and since it hasn't changed since last month very much, I'm not going to go through them, but I'll pause for a second and see if the council has any questions on these priority action items. One of the reasons I wanted to skip ahead pretty quickly is because we have a really cool video that we show every month showing progress on the Civic Center project. That is a timely video, as you can see. We are on schedule and on budget with this project. We hope to be having village council meetings in this new facility starting sometime in July. Mike Baker, project manager, Enzo Petrarca, project leader, here if the council has any questions.
Amazing.
Yeah, well done by the team here. Okay, if it's okay with you, Mayor, I'll go on to the guiding DG discussion. So we're going to start with an update on the guiding DG set of plans. Josh Kuntz from Halcyon Levine. Take it over, sir.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. It's good to see you all again. I'm going to keep my presentation very brief because we're going to spend most of the time on Jason and Jay's stuff for the sustainability plan. Really three things that I want to just brief you on. The existing conditions memorandums from currently all three teams are on track and on target. House Levine has reviewed existing conditions from the Bike and Ped consulting team and from the Streetscapes team. We've sent them back for revisions, and we're expecting those to be returned to us this week so we can get them to staff for their review on Tuesday. And likewise for our own existing conditions report. That's getting the final touches put on it, going through the various quality assurances that we do at House Levine and peer review and all those things before we get it over to staff. So those are all on target and doing very well. That's what we've been spending most of our time recently on, is assembling what we sometimes talk about as like our book report, our baseline understanding of the community before we get into things like visioning and goal setting and actual plan content development. We've got to make sure we have our heads on straight for the village before we get into all of that stuff. So it's an exciting deliverable. When we are out here again to present these things, you'll probably be hearing me say, this isn't the plan. We're looking for like a thumbs up. It's accurate. It's a good thing to stand on as we get into plan drafting. But it's also a point in time, and after this we want to get into the forward-looking stuff, the visioning, the goal setting, and the actual drafting the content of the plan document. So that's the first thing. That deliverable is coming your way. It's going to go through staff's review, and then it'll come to you all for your review and feedback. And that'll be from all three teams, and then as we get GZA up to speed, they'll have a similar report to a certain extent for the sustainability plan. The next thing is the pop-ups. I'm not sure how much Stan and Jason have briefed you on those, but we've got a series of pop-ups planned through June. We're going to be at Rotary Fest, the Farmers Market. There's going to be an ice cream truck. I'm drawing a blank on all the locations that the ice cream truck's going to be at. Cullen Park. And so some exciting ways to bring the planning process out to the community and get some feedback from people who otherwise may not, in-person events might not align with their schedule, or they might not come to an in-person event. So All Together is spearheading these. They're doing a great job. We love working with them, and they've put together some really cool things. I was just saying to Jay before this that I maybe could have come up with an ice cream truck if I had unlimited time to think about ways to, but I really can't take credit for something that cool. That's going to attract a lot of people to come out and hear about the planning process, so we're pretty excited about that. And then lastly, we're in the early stages of it, working with All Together and the other sub-teams. Our next big series of in-person events is going to be the visioning workshops. It's hard when you're going out to the community to, you kind of talk about what are the issues and opportunities first, and then we're starting to get into the visioning phase. Big picture, the question we're going to be asking the community, if we're only asking one question, is think out 20 years. What do you want Downers Grove to look like and be like in 20 years? So we're trying to get people thinking long-term, big picture, long vision. We're going to still hear some issues, just like we heard some visionary things in the kickoff, but that's going to be the tone of this next set of workshops. So we're working with All Together and staff to put together a series of 3 of these. It'll probably be one afternoon and 2 evenings. And there will be breakout groups and some live mapping exercises that we'll do with the community. And just like last time, All Together is going to help us put their unique and fun spin on it. So we're anticipating those are probably late June. and we're working with staff to dial in the final dates for those. So even as we're reviewing the existing conditions and getting that finalized to post to the project website, we'll be pushing hard on these next big outreach events. So I am happy to say that everything's on time so far and on target, and the team is meshing really well. And part of that is bringing GZA on board, and we're excited to be working with Jay and his team. And I guess that's, unless you have any questions for me, happy to take them, but we can transition into the sustainability plan part of this.
Any questions
Thank
for
you.
Josh?
Thanks, Josh.
Thank you. Might introduce you, Jason.
Yeah, Jay.
Oh, Jay first.
Yeah, we're going to let Jay introduce himself.
All right, sounds good. Next on the agenda is to get to know Jay Womack from GZA.
Excuse me. Hi, everyone. I'm Jay Womack. I work for GZA. We're in the Oak Brook, is where my office is located. I'm a landscape architect. I'm also an ecologist. I've been practicing for over 30 years. It's hard to say that. I also wear my heart on my sleeve, so if I start to tear up, it's my mom, I promise. But I love my job so much, I can't even tell you how much I love what I do. Being able to talk to people about what I do, why it's important for what we do. So I'll be the project manager for the ESP, Environmental Sustainability Plan. And I've got a few other people on my team that'll be part of it behind me. I've got a gentleman, Barry Studeman, he's our project principal in our Brook office. We also have a gentleman named Tom Klotz, who is in Livonia, Michigan, does a lot with greenhouse gas work. He works with a lot of the big transportation companies. I know you guys are going to be doing your own through Jason, but one of the things that we'll do is we'll take a look at what you guys are doing, and we'll make recommendations based on our experience on what you can do to make yourselves better, more greenhouse gas efficient, and reductions in greenhouse gas emissions. Then we've got a person who does GIS. She's incredible. She's out on the East Coast, but she actually grew up here in New Lenox. So she's really excited to be part of this project. It's kind of coming home for her, even though she lives way out east. And so those are the 4 people that will be mainly responsible for the work, but I'll be your point of contact and the person that you see on a regular basis. All right. So with that.
Thanks, Jay. Any questions for Jay?
Welcome. Thoughts, concerns? I love them all. Thank you.
Thanks, Jay. It is my distinct pleasure to introduce Jason Michnick. Jason's been on our team since January, and what he's accomplished in the first 4 or 5 months is truly astounding. He's an economist, he's an urban planner, he's a community development director with an executive director for a community development firm in his past. He's really skilled in a lot of areas, and he benefits us in all those ways. Plus, he happens to have a great skill set in environmental practice and policy. So it feels like in some ways he's been our team forever. He's certainly made our team better since he's joined us. So I'll hand it over and introduce Jason Mitchell.
Thanks, Dave. Good evening, everyone. I'm really excited to be here in front of all of you and going to share some of the stuff that I've been working on for the last about 150 days, as well as get into an actual substantive conversation about the sustainability plan. So just kind of high-level oversight of how I plan this evening going. I'm going to present kind of the goals for the workshop this evening, what we're hoping to get the direction from council this evening, provide a little bit of an update on some of the things that I've been up to, but really more the story that I see playing out here in Downers Grove. I'm just a part of it, and I'm really excited to share my observations both in the community and the village itself and our operations. I'm going to talk a little bit about the Greenest Region Compact. I know that was really the basis and motivation for the sustainability plan. So let's talk about that a little bit, what it is, what it isn't, and then a preview of our existing conditions. So this is something that you'll be seeing with the other plans here in the future. I'll give you a little preview of kind of what that's going to look like in terms of a sustainability plan, and then we'll dive into the workshop. So you're familiar with this idea that Village Council is the steering committee for guiding DG, including the sustainability plan. So the goal really for tonight's workshop is to have a conversation where we can kind of extract some guiding principles that we can then use to refine the scope of what's going to be in the sustainability plan, as well as clarify context and definitions, make sure that when we're talking about sustainability, that we're all talking about the same thing, right? And then the last thing is set directions for the next phase, right? We're going to take those guiding principles, combine them with the existing conditions, establish vision goals, and that's where we start to link the existing conditions with our goals through those strategies and actions that are going to go into that plan. So one of the things that I really want to share with you guys is in terms of sustainability planning and implementation, best practice in terms of integration into our operations is really to look at trying to incorporate sustainability into both your strategic planning and your financial planning. And what I've observed in my first few months here is that there's already an existing process where the village is combining strategic planning and financial planning in your long-range plan. So the idea here is that while this is the first strategic or environmental sustainability plan, the content of our conversations, the content of this plan is going to be a little bit different, but the process itself doesn't have to be, right? There's a successful process that you guys have already used to implement policy that we can borrow from. And within the long-range plan, you have strategic goals, very similar to the guiding principles that we're hoping to extract out of our conversation this evening. So these are the strategic goals that you have listed in the long-range plan. They can either serve as an example that we can use, or it can serve as that foundation that we build on and clarify and provide context for the sustainability plan. So here's the questions that we're going to ask you after I kind of work through the rest of this presentation. The first one is, what does being sustainable mean, right? So making sure that when we talk about the definition of sustainability, that we're all talking about the same thing. One of the challenges in sustainability is there really isn't a universal definition, right? So let's make one for ourselves as we move forward together. The second one is really what the intention and the purpose of the sustainability plan is. What does success look like in a couple of years after its adoption? And then third is really kind of what is the scope of the sustainability plan, at least the first one, going to be? Is it something that focuses internally, or do we incorporate the broader village, or somewhere in between? And then the last one is really how literally to take the framework itself, which I'll explain a little bit more as I get through the presentation. So a couple of updates, right? A major part of the first 150 days that I've been here is really just kind of learning about the village operations. I've had the opportunity to join a couple of different projects across different departments. I appreciate everybody's within the village staff really embracing me as a team member, letting me learn. And I think the advantage here is that allows us to integrate sustainability across operations. And it doesn't just become a new thing that we have to do, right? It kind of gets ingrained into the fabric and the culture of the organization. I can also confirm the findings from the 2023 GRC staff report. Right, there's a lot of deliberate effort going into our operations, but at times it can be really difficult to observe unless you know what you're looking for and you're explicitly looking for it. I've also been working to develop relationships and strategic partnerships. One of the ones that I want to highlight here that I'm particularly excited about is I reached out to some climate scientists at Argonne National Lab for some data for the existing conditions report, some basically climate modeling and predictions, and that sparked a conversation about making Downers Grove a strategic partner and where they're going to do research across the community on climate change, adaptation, and looking at our green infrastructure. So I think that's pretty exciting, something that I'll certainly be bringing back here in the near future. And then another big part is investigating external funding, right? The bipartisan infrastructure law, as well as the Inflation Reduction Act, have put a tremendous amount of federal funding towards climate change. There's a lot of programs. Some we qualify, some we don't, and just working through a lot of that takes quite a bit of time. An example of that is working on kind of our capital stack for the solar panels that are going to go on the Civic Center. So, some observations, right? So the first one is that within the community, there's this culture of environmental stewardship. Partnership with the Conservation Foundation, especially their Conservation at Home program. They were one of our key stakeholder interviews, and they specifically called out that Downers Grove is a leader in the region for participation in this program. I think that's very cool. Similar program with them is the annual DuPage River Sweep. So earlier this month we had 37 volunteers across multiple sites in the village cleaning up garbage out of our creeks, and collected 54 bags of trash. And then also for Earth Week, Greener Grove and the Park District partnered together to get our parks ready for the spring. There's also several educational programs, some through PDHA, as well as the Organic Gardeners Clubs. One that I'm also really excited about is knowing that our schools are fantastic. The teachers especially are really passionate about integrating climate change into their curriculum, but also not just what it is, but how we can develop solutions for the community. So earlier this year, about 400 teachers participated in a first of its kind conference at Downers Grove North called the Climate of Hope Conference. Brought in scientists, leaders in climate change, science and action to give presentations to the teachers. Special shout out to Jeff Grant and Mike Hines for the invitation to allow me to come participate. Outgrowth from getting to meet some of the teachers there was that I had the opportunity to go spend a day, 2 days actually, with 7th graders at O'Neill Middle School, talking about climate change and coming up with community solutions. And then also more recently working with Downers Grove High School students and getting to do a DIY workshop for Guiding DG with our own Emily Hepworth. And then in terms of the village operations, I just want to acknowledge the significant investment that the village has already made in mitigation and resilience, right? So the Civic Center is a substantial project that's going to reduce our emissions, greenhouse gas emissions. And then we have an award-winning stormwater utility, right, that's preparing us for future flooding. And then the last one is the fleet, our fleet and our water, right? So we've won several awards for Green Fleet. Also looking at kind of what the future of that looks like with potential electrification and hydrogen vehicles. And then also acknowledging the efficient drinking water system that we operate as well, that we'll be talking about in the long-range planning process in a couple of months as well. So getting into the GRC, the Greenest Region Compact. So what is it and why does it matter, right? So environmental issues are a global problem. We've tried to get together internationally and come up with frameworks and goals and targets, but there's a couple of challenges. First, there's a lack of central authority at the international level to hold anybody accountable. It's also really challenging to develop policies and actions at a national level that are one size fits all and effective at the same time. So there's been this kind of acknowledgement in recent years that climate action has to happen locally, and local governments are better suited for implementation. But then there becomes the challenge that the policy that are the solutions don't necessarily line up with the problem, right? So for example, here in the Chicago region, we have 288 municipalities and more than 1,200 divisions of local government, right? So taking action at a regional level requires some sort of mechanism of coordination, which is exactly what the Greenest Region Compact is, right? So there's actually multiple components to the Greenest Region Compact. The first one is the resolution that the council adopted that affirms our commitment to the regional effort. There's also frameworks and plans. Those are actual tools that we can use and adapt for our own operations and communities. And the last one is a committee, right? It's an ongoing mechanism for coordination and learning between communities, something that I'm actively participating in. So the GRC was created quite a long time ago, 2007. It's all evolved over time. So the first iteration of the Greenest Region Compact only had 3 goals and 28 actions. The GRC2, which is our present iteration of the compact, now has 49 goals, 315 objectives, and 104 strategies. And more recently, the Metropolitan Mayor's Caucus has adopted a climate action plan that has targets for reducing greenhouse gas emissions at a regional level. So really the story here is that over time, the GRC has gotten more sophisticated and more complex. And it was always intended to be a flexible tool that communities could adapt, basically with the idea that at the time, the average baseline for most municipalities was close to 0. they were really doing a whole lot in terms of sustainability, so the intention was really just to get the ball moving a little bit. But as it's gotten more sophisticated, that's how they've grown, and that's why you see more complex frameworks and tools now. So as it's written, most goals and objectives are require a little bit of context, but they also, when you think about the idea of an objective, requires multiple actions and policies to actually achieve. So the idea that there's 49 goals and 315 objectives in the GRC framework itself really means that there's more than 364 actions that you would have to take in order to accomplish all of those objectives and goals. So that's one of the goals tonight, is to really think about how we can refine and prioritize the recommendations from the framework into something that's actually actionable and measurable. And one of the ways we can do this is thinking about kind of the influence and authority that the village has, right? So there's things that we can do internally at a staff level, or existing programs that we can look at enhancing. We also have policies and authority that the council itself can think about and consider and implement. And then a lot of the things in the framework require community coordination or regional coordination, right? The things that are outside kind of our sphere of influence. So we can think about these kind of categories as kind of organizational objectives or community or regional objectives. So their most recent plan, adopted in 2021, the Climate Action Plan, was created through a partnership of the Chicago Metropolitan Agency for Planning, CMAP, and the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Agency, NOAA. It really evaluates climate change risk at a regional level. It measures the greenhouse gas emissions at a regional and community level, establishes reduction targets, and identifies strategies of how they're actually we're going to accomplish that at a regional level. And one of the things that we've seen is this transition towards, or shift towards, climate action plans, because the measurement of greenhouse gas emissions has gotten more sophisticated and standardized. So I pulled out one specific chart from the 200-something page document because I think this really kind of summarizes what the whole climate action plan was. I'll explain this a little bit. So this dotted line up here is what emissions at our regional level would look like as a business as usual model, right? No action is taken whatsoever. You're going to continue to grow or go up with population change. And then this bottom line are reduction targets, right? So by 2030, the goal was, based on the Paris Accord, to reduce greenhouse gas emissions 50% from a 2005 baseline. And then down to 80% by 2050. So think about that in terms of time horizons for goal setting and strategies. And then these color blocks are different strategies for how they actually accomplish the reduction targets. So the bulk of this is going to happen through looking at renewable energy sources like solar, wind, things that don't emit greenhouse gases. The next ones are building energy, and then transportation. Those are the three largest sources of reductions. So using that kind of same idea, I looked at kind of a preliminary look at what our greenhouse gas inventory at a community and organizational level looks like. So as part of that climate action plan, they conducted an inventory for communities across the region. So this is the village of Downers Grove as community greenhouse gas inventory, right? So when we look at it, buildings are the #1 source of emissions, right? So natural gas and electricity make up the bulk of that, but the largest single category is transportation. And when we look at 2019, the year this is from, a large source of those emissions are really from commuting patterns, right? So we have nearly 47,000 individuals coming into the village of Downers Grove to work. We have almost 21,000 leaving, and only about 2,600 staying. So commuting, driving, the strategic location of the village in the region, the ability to get otherwhere, leads to a lot of transportation, people driving solo in and out of the community. So this is kind of the analysis that we'll show. So it'll be inventory, but then also look at what those sources are and why, right? And then this is something that I've been working, so this is an organizational greenhouse gas inventory from 2023. So this is just a baseline for scope 1 and 2, which is just basically kind of the primary sources of emissions. And again, the #1 source is buildings, right? So natural gas and electricity. And when we look at electricity, we can actually look at which buildings are producing the most, right? So from a building standpoint, Village Hall and police, the current ones, are the largest source of greenhouse gas emissions, right? So this will be really interesting for us to look at in a year or two when we actually have a full year of energy bills and whatnot from the new facility, the Civic Center. We also, our street and traffic lights are the largest single source, right? So that's a way that we can start to identify, use a baseline, set goals, and look at strategies and identifying specific sources and using kind of that science approach to actually identify goals and strategies. So I'm going to pause there before we get into the questions and see if you guys have any initial reactions or questions about all of the stuff that I just threw to you guys.
Chris?
Yeah, the chart that you showed that broke down the goals, the objectives, 50% reduction, all that. You said that was regional?
Yes.
Okay, so can you just, what's regional to you?
So that would be the Chicago metropolitan
area.
Right? And that's based off of international standards and goals, right?
Yep.
So that 50% by 2030 is actually goes to the Paris Accord. Right?
So the region adopted
Yes.
what the international
Yeah.
code was. The second question that I have is, as it pertains to the specific to Downers Grove, you sort of had 2019 numbers, right?
Mm-hmm.
So is there, in the existing conditions coming up, will we have more recent data?
I am really hoping so.
Okay.
I've been trying really hard to get data from ComEd and NICOR, and as soon as I have it, then yes.
Okay. I just, given the change in commuting.
I know, exactly. And that's a really big question, because when you look at transportation, how has work from home impacted commuting patterns, right? Yep.
Percentages, they might stay the same, meaning the bulk of it coming from buildings and.
Yeah.
But in terms of quantitatively, the number could be reduced just based on usage. You know, we got 26 people or 2,600 people living and working. I'm sure that number is a bit higher now.
Probably.
Yeah. Yeah.
In that case,
reactions. Okay. Keep rolling.
Sure. So in that case, I'm going to jump into our workshop questions. This first one, and with each one of these questions, we've provided some, rather than fresh start or asking you guys kind of generically, we've provided something kind of contextual for you to react to start the conversation, right? So this first question of what does being sustainable mean? First definition we pulled from something the United Nations has used for about the last 40 years is meeting the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. Kind of generic, right? But it gets to the point. The second one is taken directly from the long-range planning strategic goals section on environmental stewardship, right? So environmental sustainability refers to the village's responsibility to deliver its services in a way that protects or enhances natural resources. The village seizes opportunities to green its operations when possible, whether by seeking grants to introduce new environmentally friendly practices or by seeking the most environmentally friendly option for existing services. Now I'm going to turn it over to all of you for a conversation.
So like some of the other starting rounds of these kind of major components of the guiding DG, what we're going to do tonight is just talk out loud, right? Staff will take notes, listen to our comments, and try and weave some of that into what's going on and some next steps. This whole guiding DG is an iterative process, and we're at step one on this piece of it. So just reactions to this or looking for Leslie, please.
Of course, you know, I'm going to have things to say. First, thank you so much for all the work you've done. All of the, baseline things, but also working with all of the students as well. It's really great to see. So I would take a mix between the United Nations and ours. So to me, the United Nations is far too human-centric. We are not the only living beings on this planet, and I find it slightly insulting that it kind of only considers us. So I see it more as a way that, we are living in a way that's compatible for future generations with the living world around us. Essentially, that we can continue to coexist in a world where, of course, we know that, not every species that exists now is going to exist in 20 years, but in a way that we have kind of the same biodiversity, ability to live compatibly that we have now, without compromising, major quality of life. For me, it is important to recognize that like we don't have a lot of time. You know, we keep talking about it, but it's true. So I just recently saw that, for example, what they call the Doomsday Glacier has now been shown that it is starting to melt, and we're seeing massive, you know, water flows and coming from that. We're in a place where we really do have to act now, and if there isn't a way that we can do this internationally, it really is upon us. You know, we are making the rules, regulations, and policies for generations to come. It is incumbent upon us to actually do something about it. And as we know with a lot of the bipartisan, you know, Infrastructure Act, that we are likely to get more restrictions that are going to be coming down probably from a federal, state, and even regional level. And it's really in our best interest to get on top of that now. Before we start getting, I know that Commissioner Tully loves talking about unfunded mandates. It's going to happen because we're starting to see some pretty severe impacts. So it's in everybody's best interest, including our taxpayers, to really start getting a handle on this as soon as we can. The other thing when it comes, I know that, you know, I had my definition, but this is an important part of it, is that we always talk about all the individual efforts that people can do, and like, we're doing them. But that's not, as we see from the graphs, that is not what is going to actually change the direction. It is literally the, you know, the large policies of the ways in which we produce electricity, you know, the way we use our transportation system, what we choose to invest in, you know, all of those things from, I mean, I would say the municipal level is probably the smallest level that we would consider that at, but really we need this from state, federal, you know, global corporate levels if we really want to make a difference. It's great when other municipalities, we don't, have no mow May, sure, but is that, you know, are those few yards with some flowers really going to move the needle? It's not. It's wonderful, it's great for the local pollinators. You know, we only plant, as I've mentioned multiple times, native plants in our garden. The more we can get that village-wide, the better that is. But those small individual actions are not what is going to move the needle on this. It really is us being strategic about the way that we craft our policy to really encourage a reduction in greenhouse gases and change the way that we see sustainability. And that's just something we have not considered in Downers Grove, and something that I've been talking about since 2019, and I'm really excited to see this finally coming to fruition, now having a staff member who is knowledgeable on the topic, and really hoping that we can have some meaningful conversation and get to some goals. I think sometimes when folks talk about sustainability, and you know, we've heard it even from residents and other conversations, we tend to get too into the weeds in terms of the goals, but from just this broad perspective of what being sustainable means, it really is just that general existence of living within our means, you know, and protecting the biodiversity and the natural world that we do have. So I am a proponent of keeping the definition rather generic, because it shouldn't be a directive. To me, it feels like more of a vision statement, and that is not something that is typically specific or actionable, but, you know, kind of like a pie in the sky ideal. So that's my soapbox rant for now. I'm sure I'll have another one.
I'm very disappointed.
Other thoughts? What's sustainable mean, Martin?
Well, the only thing I'll say is I like, probably because I was involved at some point in writing it, the first sentence.
Yes.
Is fine.
Yes.
What I would take out is the second sentence. That's
Correct.
how to do it.
Yes.
That's
I
not
agree with you.
what it is.
Right.
Now, I'll come back to that, because when we get to either question 2 or 3 or 4, I think that's where number 2 comes up. 'Cause that's how you do the second sentence is how you do the first sentence. So not to nitpick about it, but I would not include that second sentence in a definition of sustainable. I think the first sentence is generic enough.
I agree.
Then we don't have to wordsmith it, and that's coming from a lawyer. I'm not going to wordsmith it.
Whoa. Come on. There's no billable hour attached.
I'm trying to be sustainable.
I mean, I would agree with that being like the way that the village would approach it, but I don't think that's like the general state. You know what I mean? Like, I don't think that's the general definition of sustainability.
Well, we're talking
No,
about...
right, but I
Yes.
mean to us.
But
We're
yes.
talking about
To us.
village. What would the
Talking about
village
us.
approach? And well, the village isn't going to play a role in defining how we produce energy.
Right.
Mike?
I was going to say that, looking at that first sentence under the LRP, the emphasis on the village's responsibility to deliver its services in a way that protects or enhances natural resources, the idea that we're leading by example here, right? And that's kind of where we start.
Greg?
Thank you, Mayor. I agree. The first sentence is sort of the core of it. I think we have to be primarily, at least to begin with, internally focused. But then it also has to be something broader. It's our soft power in that we have the ability to encourage things, to set an example, and I think at some point it becomes about hard power. It becomes about regulatory frameworks. I think we're a ways away from that, but I think we have to have that potentially on the table if we're going to see the changes that I think we want to see and overall need to see over the course of the next 10, 15, 20 years.
So I would say the state adopted a new energy code that went into effect January 1st, and that we of course adopt it as well, and those are the kinds of things that we have control over that that do affect other things in the town other than just the things that we're doing.
And it's going. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, should it include the responsibility to deliver services and maybe set policies that protects or enhances natural resources?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And then I think it's going out into the market. It's part of our economic development goals. What kind of businesses are we looking to bring into town? What kind of innovation are we looking to bring into town? There's any number of things that can go into this from that soft power standpoint.
The responsibility to deliver services part feels like to me we have to, for trying to set a vision that funnels down into guidance for policy processes. There's got to be something in there about, I know the second sentence is how, and I appreciate that, but the fact is we are going to continue to make some decisions that deliver services in ways that don't protect or enhance our resources because we have limits.
That's the word possible, right? Opportunities to green its operations impossible.
That's why I was bringing up that second sentence has some components that are valuable still. I appreciate the idea that that's a how-to a little bit, but if you just ended that first period, we're not going. There's going to be instances where we choose to not do that.
We just can't afford to do maybe the most, right? We have limitations.
Well, that's inherent, though. We have responsibility to plow the streets. That doesn't mean we can always do it perfectly all the time. We do it. Everything is done within in a measured way.
Governing is the art of the possible.
Right. I'm just saying that to go out and purchase electric-powered, snowplows at this point is not a practical thing to do, although it would be much better for the environment potentially. Right, so
you're saying it might not be as effective at the snow and ice control latitude yet. Got it.
Are you saying that? Are you saying that it may not be as effective, or that it may be too costly?
It may not. So it may not be as effective. It may not be cost. And actually, those two things may be tied together.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
But thank you for the clarification.
Thank you for that clarification. I like the term future generations. I think so. I like the first definition. Clearly, it's very concise in a way that maybe ours isn't as. But I also like ours as being more applicable to what we do. Something about the term future generations or something about looking forward that I think could help to drive policy, or if this is the definition of sustainability that we're settling on, or we're looking to help us make decisions, having something that's tied to the future or future generations, to me, is more guidance than just the now. Because in my book, all of this sustainability has to do with helping the future, preparing for or setting ourselves up in a way that, is meeting the needs of the future generations. So
I don't have a problem with that. I think inherent in sustainability is the prospective nature of it, because you're continuing something.
So we have a goal of wanting to continually innovate, right? So and I think this kind of dovetails into that as well.
Definition by committee.
Yeah.
It's very helpful.
That's what you get.
Yeah, I guess
I mean, this is all going in the hopper.
Yeah. No, that's, of course. I guess the only concern I have about the comments of like cost effectiveness and feasibility is I just don't want to, that cost can be defined in a lot of ways, right?
Sure.
So there's outlay, there's future value, and so I would just want to be hesitant that when possible, just kind of feels like an easy escape hatch to, sort of throw this out because I'm just going to use this example. The battery operated plow is more expensive than the diesel plow, whatever. So I always just get a little nervous about that because, believe me, I understand cost is reality.
Well, there's policy questions too. I mean, at a national level, there's the debate right now over Chinese EVs, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And clearly, there's a choice. There has nothing to do with cost.
Yeah.
Clearly, there's a policy
Yeah.
being weighed, and we'll find ourselves in similar situations. I mean, that high level of policy, but
Yeah.
it may not be just pure cost. It still may be other factors that cause you to do
Exactly.
something different.
Right, but I mean, you can go back to the slide with the LRP strategic goals. We have to look at it holistically. We're not, we have a stewardship of financial, environmental, and neighborhood sustainability. So plus a bunch of other things, exceptional services, top quality infrastructure, strong diverse local economy, safe and welcoming community, beautiful community, continual innovation, all those things I think together. So I'm not concerned about it because I don't think any one of those things is going to drive the others out. I think we have to look at all of these balanced with those 7 things that we all sat here 6 months ago and did wordsmith.
Right.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think sustainability, environmental sustainability, to me, feels though like a thread that we're required, that we're in a position where it's a thread that has to go through all of those things. I don't, this is a little different to me than some of the other ones. I don't feel like I feel like it's integrated far more into some of those objectives, or should be, maybe, or I feel they should be, because of the climate crisis that we are facing, and I feel like it's a little different. I understand there's limitations. I'm not saying that we can
The facility's a pretty
run it
good
on
example,
bubbles, but
I think a facility is a pretty good example of us doing this well. Even though it might not have been the perfect statement between that and our strategic goals and this culture. You wouldn't talk about a threat. It's a cultural thing, right? It has to be part of the culture of the organization.
Yeah.
And I think we need to be talking in ways that we continue that and enhance that, because I think it is.
Yeah. But, and a great example, I think, facilities is a great example. We, I believe, move forward with a lot of environmental considerations in a positive way. And in 10 years, there could be 15 things that would be better and upgraded. And I want to just make sure that we don't set it and forget it, or pat ourselves on the back for doing the great work, which we should, but as you said, Martin, it's inherent to the word sustainable. It's something I think that needs to be kept up.
And to that point, Martin's comment about strategic goals, that continual innovation has to be applied here too.
Yeah.
And it would be, because it's part of the rest of the document.
Yeah.
Right, that's.
absolutely.
You think you got enough to take another run at a
We only have this
update?
much more space for definitions.
I mean, we're not, this isn't going to be the last conversation we have on this thing. Has anybody got anything they really want to throw in that hasn't been said?
Awesome, thank you.
Is there an opportunity for public comment?
We will take
Really
public
on one,
comment.
are we?
We're going to get through, this is not the final word, and so we're going to get through the list of 4 or 5 subjects, and then we'll be taking a bunch of public comment, which will also be in this hopper. We're not walking out of the room tonight with a decided writing. Continue.
Thank you. The second question is really trying to understand how the sustainability plan is going to be used as a tool, right? So what is the intent or purpose of the plan, and what would success look like 1 or 2 years after its adoption? And again, just something for you guys to react to, take it or leave it. But a potential recommendation here would be, it's a tool that can be used similarly to the long-range planning process, right? It's establishing high-level goals and long-term objectives. It can be approached through a recurring process that focuses on priority action items. So something that's familiar.
So I'm just going to throw out everything because it's 9:42, rather than wait for every question. I specifically wanted to highlight that second sentence because it states the village seizes opportunities to green its operations when possible, whether by seeking grants to reduce new environmentally friendly practices or by seeking the most environmentally friendly option for existing services. I'm going to leverage that, just make 4 points and I'll stop talking, but then it'll be my comments about everything. I like the opportunistic approach that we've taken in the past because it's been very, very successful. I mean, frankly, for 20 years, this village was probably too quietly being opportunistic when it came to environmental sustainability, whether it's biodiesel in the fleet, whether it's solar, whether it's wind, whether it's the grant that we got for, not Prentice Creek. Yes, Prentice Creek, thank you. With the street lights, there's a number of things that we've done that we probably didn't celebrate as much as we should have. It's the way we are. I'll come back to that in a minute. But I think that now we have this terrific framework that gives us a framework for how to better recognize and seize upon opportunities. So when they arise, and we have opportunities every day, so this isn't something that we're just going to sit around and wait until something flies over our head. There are opportunities in every single thing that we do as a municipality that create opportunities. And I would love to continue to leverage opportunities, be opportunistic, be continually innovative, encourage staff to, when they see something, to say, hey, I got an idea. Can we? Yes, let's do it. Rather than, here's your 9 things you've got to do by December 31st.
Right.
That's just my view. Let's not even get into all the other things that we've got going on right now. But to have that framework so that when opportunities arise, there isn't a lot of debate or discussions like, yes, this is right in our framework, this fits with the program, let's do it. And then basically Dave tells us, guess what we just did? Oh, wonderful. I don't think. And it's a way to measure success because then we can say, here are X number of things we did in a given year that met with that framework. It also helps provide a framework for the village council when we have conversations about whatever, design guidelines, it could be anything. And I think that's terrific. And if we want to identify some particular goals in the framework, that's great. But I would prefer to be opportunistic and sort of let staff do what they do best, our enhanced staff do what they do best. So leveraging the framework in that way, I completely agree with you, Commissioner, about getting ahead of unfunded mandates. So if we know something's coming, let's not wait. Let's get started on it. Completely agree with you. Those are no-brainers. That's just good planning. And if it's also environmentally sustainable, then it's what is it? Then it's economically, neighborhood, and environmentally sustainable. So it's the trifecta. Point number 2 is we should continue to lead by example. I know we have, even with other municipalities in DuPage County, but I think we can extend that and lead by example in the private sector. Because I know a lot of resistance sometimes is, well, you know, how's that going to work? And but if we do it as a village, as our business, I think we can show as an example to other private entities that there is a effective and efficient way to do the right thing. And so I think that's good, which comes back to celebrating the accomplishments. And I know some people aren't comfortable with celebrate, but promote and I don't want to say, yeah, I'll just leave it at promote. To promote what we're doing more, I think that is probably the best way to get people to do things. And to the extent that we can create opportunities, either whether it's something as simple as rain barrels or it's other programs that we're partnering with people on, I think that's a great thing to do. And I just mentioned it, but the last point would be big fan of cooperation, collaboration. Yep. So leveraging partnerships, seeking out new partnerships is great, because then you get that forced multiplier element going on, where it's not just we're doing something, the park district's doing something, somebody else is doing something, but we all work together, and now we're actually achieving a whole that is greater than some of its parts. So, sorry, I just figured I'd get it all out. That's my answer to 2 and 3 and 4.
So I'll piggyback a little bit on the celebrating, because that's something that I felt was even, when I first came on council, that that's something that we've done a lot of great things here, and not enough people know about it. And so one of the ways I would measure success is that, that we'd start hearing back from the community positive things about what the village has been doing. For instance, maybe Janet, our friend, comes up to the microphone and tells us about a conversation that she had in Anderson Bookshop with somebody about the new parking area that got done with more environmentally friendly paving techniques, right? So that's when the community starts, reflecting on this and recognizing what we're doing. I think that's a success. So communication is a challenge. We've talked about that a lot, and not only just about what we're doing, but and making people aware of, hey, this property is zone DT, but just everything that we're doing, communicating that is a challenge, and it's something we need to work harder at.
That's a success.
Yes, A.
But the top success is to actually continuously improve in our environmental. We will never stop trying to improve communication. But even if somebody doesn't know or recognize, we still have to do the right thing when we're doing planning and making investments, right? So for me, that's a little secondary. That's a good point. I think if anything, we've hurt ourselves. If we think we want to set examples, we think we want to inform, we've hurt ourselves by not talking about it enough and demonstrating it enough. But it still is still way down the list for me as opposed to the actual work.
Sure.
Although I would say that, if we say we want to set an example, people have to notice, right? And so, I mean, in a way, there still is a little bit of awareness in there, in that perhaps, maybe it's not necessarily conversations, but people actually, taking the steps to add renewable energy, into their home, or, whatever the case may be, or, do something similar to what we're doing, or get engaged in that effort. So, I see what you're saying, yeah. But I would say, in the long term, I don't think in a year or two we're going to get there, but I would say in the long term that would be something that I would care about. I would agree, we have done all of the things that we can with the expertise that we have on staff, and that is no dig on staff, but they will self-admit that we did not have anybody with an environmental sustainability background on staff for ever. So the reality is, while we're doing the best that we can, this is probably not the best that we can do. And so I would argue that we should push a little bit more than kind of the as they come up moments, because there are probably a lot of things that we are missing without having a more formalized plan in place. So I would like to see a little bit more detail put into place. And again, I'm going to go into the GRC framework. In no way, shape, or form do I think that we should attack that whole thing. That would be outrageous, and it would be a huge mistake. I think we need to focus on the areas that we kind of saw the least engagement. And to me, if I recall correctly, the energy sector, and the policy sector, right? If we don't have policies in place to encourage environmentally sustainable behavior, we don't have policies in place, to say, if business comes in and wants to use renewable energy, we could offer incentives to make that a little bit easier. Those are just things that we've never explored because we've never had the expertise on staff to do that properly and in a way that's not going to be really financially detrimental to the village. So I think we need to focus on those areas now, again, that we have some staff expertise and we're engaging our consultants to really come up with, what are these key, and even using our long-range planning, key 10 items that would have the greatest impact that we could realistically start to make progress on in the next year or two. So I would love to see us reduce our greenhouse gas emissions. I would love to see a shift in the building energy. So I can't say what success will exactly look like. All I can say is I would see improvements on the metrics that we are choosing to set based on our initial or existing conditions plan and say, I want to see improvements from this based on X, Y, and Z in some very specific areas where we know we just really are lacking. So especially given the fact that when you were showing the graph, decarbonizing our energy sources is going to have the greatest impact. Knowing that that's an area that we struggle with, that to me seems like a really important place to start. So I think we really need to look at those areas in which we're lacking, and that could actually have the greatest impact from a municipal level. And then, if we start to measure our success there, then we kind of can start to think about some of those policy implications of how can we encourage people to do this throughout the village. I think this also really connects with the bike and ped plan, because as we talk about transportation, and again, I know not everybody can divest from their car, right? Some people are obviously going to need cars, but there are ways in which, someone like me could bike throughout the village in a more safe manner that I'm just not comfortable doing now because we don't have the infrastructure to do that. And again, I know we can't go back our 50 years and plan the width of our streets and all of that, but we can make these incremental changes as we go. And I think that's probably partly what Commissioner Tully was saying, that as we're moving forward, as we have projects arise, we now have a little bit more expertise to maybe delve into that a little better than we might have been able to in the past. So those are my kind of, big thoughts, but that's where I'm going on this question.
Greg, you want to say something?
Yeah, thank you. We absolutely have to remain opportunistic. We have to make sure that when those chances arise to do something, that we take advantage of them. And I think that's kind of how we roll to begin with.
Mm-hmm.
So I feel very confident that that'll remain. But I think Leslie's right. There has to be an intentionality to this. That we have to, I think, identifying whether it's top 5, 10, 20, whatever it might be, key items, and laying out a plan is essential. To me, that's part of the success. Mm-hmm. And then it's, what do those metrics look like? How have they changed over the period of a year, 2 years? But then also it's fully developing the toolbox of what else can we do to have not only an impact on our own operations, but the community at large. And I think that's part of facilitation, and I think we have to be willing to at least talk about and consider regulation. What do those things look like? How can we encourage and, if necessary, regulate, whether it's greenhouse gas or electrical use or whatever it might be, water conservation, any number of things. I would like to see a fuller definition of the toolbox that's available to us.
That's a wrong way to start it. It's not accurate to suggest we don't have policies. But we made policy changes to make, we've taken an opportunistic approach, but there are absolutely policy things, whether it's the water system, or it's the stormwater work that we do, or it's which is regulation, or it's the deregulation we did on solar access. We absolutely have engaged in policies to improve not only our efforts, but the community's effect and impact on the environment. should there be more of that? Maybe we'll talk about that. But it's not like we haven't been doing that stuff.
No, I was referring to when we went through the GRC framework and our alignment. That was kind of one of the areas where we weren't as closely aligned as others, so.
Yeah, just from a staff perspective on that, the GRC report showed that a lot of our policies in more traditional areas like land use and water and stormwater were pretty strong.
Yeah.
In areas that we weren't as strong were like energy,
Policies around that.
policy around energy. So it's an interesting, and Jason, we had a slide in there that we decided to keep in our back pocket at some point, but we analyzed the GRC framework in that lens, which are policies, how are we doing on policies, which are regulations, which are, so we can dust that off in our next report. I think it hits on this issue.
Yeah.
How else do we define success?
Yeah, so I think I want to echo a couple things that you said, Commissioner Sadowski, if you get. One of the words you said, which I was thinking too, was just this idea of incentivize. We talk about regulate or deregulate, but I think if there is behavior that needs to change, I think I'd rather incentivize than try to limit. Carrot versus stick, thank you.
That's what we do with kids, right?
And I guess I wonder, I haven't thought this through, so I'll just lay that out there, but I guess when I thought I thought it through in terms of what I think it might be a good approach, but I don't know the ramifications, but why couldn't we develop an environmental sustainability plan similar to the comprehensive plan, where it does, in some ways, the comprehensive plan is the vision. In some ways, we leverage that to guide our decision-making. And so that's sort of how when I was thinking about like what's the purpose of it, I feel like it does have to be a guiding document, and whether that's in energy use or how we map out our transportation, I don't know. I haven't gotten that far. That's what the experts are for. But I do think there's something to the idea of this layer that allows us to. But I think it's important to me to keep that incentivizing concept, because I think a lot of the regulation that we do puts us sometimes into this reaction to something that may be different, as opposed to, and it's all the way it should be. We're regulating, and that's our job, regulating body. But this feels like if we're trying to move the needle on something, incentivizing is the way that I feel like this needs to come from that place, from that place. So, and
get people to recognize the value.
Right, or you give them extra value,
Exactly.
right? I mean, I don't want to get specific
And then they see the wins. Yeah.
at all, but if I'm bringing my business to town and I have a certain fleet that's this way, or we have opportunity to provide things, or in a residential building, would you design a house differently if there was incentives based on energy efficiency? I mean, and I know that stuff happens too, but. And I also want to say I agree with this idea of what are the things we need to tackle, and then backwards designing our objectives from that. If there's, So if we, if we put forth these 10 things that are where we're weak, or the 10 things that we want to focus on and prioritize those, we have an objective and then work backwards to how we approach those. I think a little different than approach them as they come, which I don't want that to come off, because I think there has been a lot of great work, but the incremental, well, this project's here, so we're going to apply it to that, has to happen. But I also feel like in parallel, there has to be efforts to have real impact on those, those environmental weakness. I don't know what you want to call them. What do we call the
Things we weren't strong in.
Areas of opportunity.
areas of opportunity? Yeah, exactly. So that's my thought. And in terms of success, I think I think success to me in 1 or 2 years is a plan that is actionable, that is measurable, that is
So it's 1 or 2
realistic.
years after the plan, right?
Yeah.
Right. Oh, after the plan.
Yeah.
Sorry. Thanks for that.
Yep.
So we
Okay.
actually took those steps, and then we actually
Of
measured the
course.
success,
Yes,
right?
yes, yeah.
Doesn't that look like the LRP though? 'Cause it can't be static. You can't say these 10 things and then think next year those 10 things are all gonna be gone, right? It's gonna be 2 or 3 of them plus 5 new ones and I mean, it's,
Yeah.
I think, for me,
It
success
looks
is
like that.
treated just like the LRP.
I guess, but the LRP is at risk every 2 years.
Yeah, you bet.
And I don't know that our environmental sustainability should be reshuffled every 2 years.
Yeah, but we can't,
Well,
we
that's
can't,
how bad
we can't
this
bind
gets
the future
reshuffled every
council.
2
This
years. Yeah,
deck
that's-
is shuffled. so
I mean, that's the
Well, we do that
reality
with,
of all of
but we
it.
do that with the comprehensive plan.
Right.
Yeah.
We do
Yeah.
exactly that with the
So I think that's
comprehensive
why he was
plan.
arguing that it'll be more like the comprehensive plan, in that it's something that's guiding us.
So pulling that thread a little further, in the comprehensive plan, we've got these sort of, for lack of a better description, the comprehensive plan's got pieces.
Mhm.
You see this at the same elevation, the first one below, so that whether it's bike and ped or traffic or
Mhm.
those are sort of still subservient to this, right? That's kind of what you're saying?
Yeah, I-
Raises up the,
Yeah, again, I don't know if it's an exact fit to the comprehensive plan, that's why I'm hesitating a little bit. But I see it as a guiding document that goes beyond just every 2 years. And that it can be presented in a way that is actionable, much like the comprehensive plan, but I don't think it's not limiting. I think that there is room for some interpretation, which we would expect with councils changing over.
well, the comprehensive plan is really more aspirational
Right.
than actionable.
Yeah.
Your LRP and high priority action tend to be implementation stuff along the way.
Fair. It's aspirational, but I don't want to get, maybe we're getting too deep into how we view the comprehensive plan, but it sits in every report we get on decisions we're making on how it meets, it drives that as a, for lack of a better word, a standard that it meets. It supports the efforts we're doing. We leverage it to support the efforts that we're doing in a way that we don't with a lot of other things.
I think there's probably room for both things. The challenge is that the comprehensive plan is largely metric-free.
Yeah.
And so if you're trying to take steps and measure.
Oh, I don't see it that way. I'm sorry. We look at the comprehensive plan and we see the development that has happened over the years in different areas, and we can measure and say, did we meet that by putting a transitional building in DT that was looked for? Did we revitalize these areas? Are we focusing on those things? So, measured in the sense of, CO2 emissions, of course, but I don't know. I feel like, I don't know. To me, it does feel like, because it is a part of a lot of the decisions we make and the way we're shaping the village. I don't know. It does feel measurable to me.
This is incredibly helpful to staff, because we've been trying to figure out how the comprehensive plan relates to the sustainability plan,
Yeah.
relates to our action plans.
Yeah.
This is really helpful. Josh is taking notes here too.
Yeah.
I think we're getting a picture that they all have to be layered. I'm gonna say the word layered. Layered, I hear Christian say.
Mhm.
Like, all these things have to be layered in at various levels, and we're always, some have long horizons, some have short horizons, some, maybe the environmental sustainability plan appears in our staff reports, compliance with the sustainability plan, that kind of stuff.
And I guess what I think a discussion would be, does it sit at the comprehensive plan layer where it's aspirational? Or does it sit at the, I'll just use this example, design guidelines, which is partly aspirational but also directive in some ways? Or is it closer to regulation and standard that is required? And that, I mean, that I feel like is a whole discussion on its own, but.
Well, it's probably one we should continue, though, because it
Yeah,
is going to be
yeah.
how we measure it.
I personally think it needs to be your ladder. We need to have some aspirational aspect to
Yep.
it, right? We have to have some long-term goal that we're getting
Mhm.
towards, but we also need to have some real directives, so otherwise we're not gonna make movement. Sorry, similar to the bike and ped plan that we did.
Well, yeah, for that reason, I think it has to be somewhere, just to stick with your example, somewhere around the design guideline
agree.
framework. Because it does have, sort of rubber meeting the road to it, but it's also aspirational in nature. I mean, that's why we're talking about the definition of sustainability in such broad terms. And just to clarify something based on what Chris was talking about, I mean, I sort of, and maybe I shouldn't have taken this for granted, but I take it for granted that our staff, when implementing these things, and the council is, at least in the entirety of my being plugged in, even before I was elected, operates from a first position of facilitate rather than regulate.
Yeah.
But I think what I'm trying to say is, I don't want to limit our toolbox coming out of the box. We need to be, if we're going to be serious about it, we need to have a long and serious conversation about how far are we willing to go. What I'm trying to say is, let's have as broad a conversation in terms of facilitating and regulating as possible.
The good news is we're working on the COP plan, the sustainability plan, and an update to our LRP. We're kind of hitting all levels all at the same time now, and the council will be able to slot these policy statements and goals and visions into the appropriate level as we go through. Probably won't see what that looks like for a couple more months yet, but we are working on all levels at all times. This is a great opportunity.
I have kind of an overarching question. Maybe you all have talked about this a little bit prior to my being here, but I appreciate very much, I think this is totally appropriate that we go through and figure out what's right for Downers Grove, right? But we don't need to reinvent the wheel here completely, do we? I mean, are there other municipalities in the Chicago area that maybe we ought to be looking at what they're doing, and maybe there's something there that we go, that makes a lot of sense for us.
Even if you go on the GRC website, there are some really great examples of action plans.
So what I'd be looking for, though, is that now that we have the professional guidance on this, for maybe some specific suggestions based on looking at those other examples in the area. That Jason, you might say this is something that we ought to look at.
Yeah, we beat Jason's arrival by 2 months on that, so we could refresh that. But if you're interested in sort of the comparison of what other towns are doing and our analysis of it, that was in the November ECC staff report. It's a really good place to kind of look and see what's out there.
I think I'd like to bring that.
Yeah, we did our best, but
I know that there are, so it was a little rhetorical, but now that we have the expertise, let's see if we can cherry pick some things.
I see this thing as being a success for me is an elevated priority to the subject matter. I think it has to be part of the comp plan, and Greg, your description of the design guidelines is probably pretty apt.
I can't take credit for it, I stole it from you.
But it really has to have both. It has to have this aspiration that's 10 years out, but it also has to have an LRP aspect, which is what do we think we're going to try and do in the next 24 months, because we still do have this turnover every 2 years.
Yeah, I think maybe where I'm struggling a little, not struggling, but what we do is one thing. What we expect, and maybe that's part of the conversation of from the organization as a village or of the broader out to the residents, I guess maybe that's something that I think also needs to be addressed in terms of...
Well, if Martin hadn't jumped the gun, we'd be coming to that.
Okay. I forgot. He looked ahead.
He cheated.
Well, maybe that's a good cue for us. We got a couple questions left. We're kind of hitting on all of them. I'll turn it back over to Jason to put the next question up on the board.
So this is really about the scope of the plan, right? So thinking about this as a spectrum of really kind of focusing on village operations, versus the broader community, or like the way that Jay kind of asked this question, was the idea of when we say village sustainability plan, what does village mean, right? And again, something to react to is an emphasis on village operations, knowing that because of our nature, we're public service providers, the impact of our operations go beyond just what's happening in our buildings, right? They're going into the community. Collaboration with strategic partners, right? We're not the only local government here in town. There's a lot of excellent organizations that I also mentioned. And also the idea of easing pathways to sustainability practices in the community. So
incentives, and I think we've already covered this.
Yeah. Well, Chris, you were kind of starting down this road a little further.
Yeah, yes, yes, it was in the context of the plan, but I think in terms of, I guess my answer to this question is, I think it should focus on the village operations internally, and then the village operations as they touch the broader community. So I'm not sure.
You don't see it as an either or.
I don't see it.
Yeah,
I don't see it as an either or. I understand the value of the village doing it and being an example and promoting all that. All of that is fine. But and I guess maybe one of the questions I have, which you can't answer tonight, but is what's the juice from that squeeze? What are we going to impact just as the village operations versus the broader community? What's the potential impact that we can have? Because if the village operations goes super green, super environmental sustain, I should say more so, if we're more so, what do we gain from that? And then if we step out into what we might, as I was saying, expect or incentivize, what's the gain from that? That, to me, I think would maybe have a little more bearing on what we would do.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, and I also, I don't know that they're separated, because if we're talking about policy, it's kind of a broader community, but it's still something that we have control over. So I would say that, starting at that aspirational level, I think it should be wholly inclusive of the whole community. I think we really need to set that tone from the aspirational portion of it. If we're talking about, those very specific, LRP type directives, obviously those are going to change every couple of years depending on who it is. So there might be 1-2 year where we focus only on village operations, but there might be another 2 years where we really start to think about some of those broader policy implications. So I don't necessarily want to count all of that out. I personally, in this moment, think that, we should focus on village operations to start, because that's where we have the most control, and that's where we can learn the most about, what is going to have the greatest impact and what is going to be the most cost effective, and what are the things that we really think that we can kind of pass along our learnings to the broader community. But I don't think that we should necessarily limit it from the broader perspective. So I think the recommendation is pretty on point.
That's what I was about to say. I think it's
but for all of those reasons, right? Because again, just us doing the thing is not going to be enough. It's like all of us, if my neighborhood all planted natives, that's great, but it's not, a greater impact, and we're not, broadening the scope.
Just to pick up on what both of you just said, so I agree with that, and I agree that we can serve as mentors, to kind of back the comment I said earlier. So people are like, well, how do I do this? I'm not sure. I'm scared. Let's talk about historic landmarking historic homes. People who've already done it have been the best advocates for other people to do it. So we can serve as a mentor and an advocate in that respect. But I also want to pick up on something that you said, Chris, which is the incentive part. Leveraging existing partnerships and things like that. There are things that we can do both with incentives that we can offer, and you mentioned if there's a sustainable energy business we want to attract to town. I don't think ones that were applied.
Right.
So we've never had the the proposal to consider, but
Yeah.
maybe if we said, hey, we're kind of open to this, and we might follow some models that we've used in other situations, we measure the value, the return to the community differently, I think we'd get some applications. And then furthermore, why can't we partner with, whether it's the chamber or the EDC or whoever, to try to think creatively about, how do we attract businesses that would help push this forward or help to, proselytize is the wrong word. That's the only one that comes to my mind. But to
I think it's
advocate.
a good word.
All right, proselytize. I'll go with proselytize.
I don't
Thank
even
you.
know how to write that. I was thinking about it in terms of international relations, as soft power. It's using the Economic Development
Proselytize.
Corporation to go out there and have an effect in the marketplace.
But I mean, I think what I'm getting at is maybe ways rather than, I like carrot, there's ways to get people to do things and change behavior without
Yeah.
punching them in the
It's a
head.
much better way to start.
Yes. And you start to change,
You get buy-in.
right, you get exactly.
Yeah,
And then
absolutely.
the buy-in begets more buy-in.
Yeah, I agree.
Exactly.
So this is a legit question, not loaded. If we just focus on village operations, are we really making a difference?
To start. I think to start.
But the recommendation is, this was this was an emphasis on village operations, comma, collaboration
Yeah.
with strategic partners,
Yeah.
comma, and easing pathway to sustainable practices in the community.
It's about getting your own house in order
it's all-
first.
yeah.
That's it.
But it's all
getting
those-
our house
it's
in
doing
order
all those
first.
things.
So the question is,
I'm not ordering it.
focus on village operations or the broader community?
I don't think anybody is arguing that we ignore the broader community. I think it's just what Greg said. We need to get our house in order first and learn from our own mistakes before we can help others understand how they can do it better.
I'm going to read
Emphasis
and that's when it
as
goes
modifying everything that comes after.
Yeah, and that's when it goes
mutually
in.
exclusive.
Sorry,
Yeah,
but
right.
then it becomes leveraging those partnerships, learning from other people, and then becoming a teacher to the other organizations that might need a little more, and then it's the larger community. I mean, this village is no stranger to regional leadership, whether it's putting the peer jury back together, DMMC. I mean, this is something that
Stormwater
we're equipped to do. Stormwater utility, absolutely. This is something we're equipped to do.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think what's funny is the answer is way better than the question. We posed it as an either or, but somehow
Yes.
Jason was
Yeah,
able to capture
recommendation
that.
is-
He
And
put
I
it
think
together.
It's everything.
Yeah, I think the recommendation is on point.
Not sure I agree, but we can go. I just, I don't, not that I don't agree. Of course I want to be a shining example. Of course but I guess I feel like we just built the shining example building. So what else, this is a legit question, you're going to help me answer, James, or Jason. What else do we, what more is there to do that's going to have the kind of impact that we're talking about, reducing emissions, we're talking about, streetlights is a great example. I had no idea that was the biggest, that's crazy to me. I mean, crazy, good information to know.
Yeah.
There's a lot of them.
But we don't control them all, do we? So how many do we control, and what's the impact of that?
That are old, too.
Right.
I mean, I guess I agree with you in theory, but I think realistically, in practice, we are not going to get other people on board. And
Our plan isn't supposed to be
Well, so
realistic. It's supposed to be
where I said the
aspirational.
Of course
yes,
it is.
but that's
Government
the
is the art of
different.
the possible.
But that's the aspirational. We all agree that it would be all, including the broader community. But when we're talking about those few specific things that we might be working on the next few years,
Yeah.
they're probably going to be things that we're getting in order for ourselves
Yeah.
first, so that we can better serve people from the broader perspective.
So maybe said another way, I don't think I can answer this question until I know what the impact of focusing on the village operations versus the broader community.
Well, okay.
I mean, do I agree with the recommendation? Of course. I don't know.
So I'm
not trying to be
I'm just
difficult,
not
I
even-
just-
I'm not going to make the
Ain't broke, don't fix
the
it.
question. The recommendation, so we could reorder it. We could say an emphasis on easing pathway to sustainable practice in the community, comma, emphasis on village operation. I mean, to me, it's all That captures what I want to
Okay.
see happen, so I'm not interested in trying to answer that question.
Yeah.
One or the other. I mean, I think
But,
Jason's put that
the
together.
way I read the recommendation, village operations first, then go hang out with some partners. I'm being a little silly,
See,
but.
that's not how I was reading it.
And, well,
All three of those things, we should be doing all three of those things day one.
okay.
So it wasn't.
Is that how it was
this
written?
to This.
Was it
Yeah,
written?
I think so, because as opposed to saying we should jump into regulating activities in our community first, right?
Yeah,
something
or,
like that.
okay, let's,
I'm agreeing with you here.
no, I'm agreeing with you. So I think, okay, maybe this is how I saw it. This is how I saw it. Our DEI initiatives.
Yes.
Right? We made a decision that we were going to focus internally on that and then decide how that might apply outside of the village. Is that what this is saying?
Pretty much.
Okay.
That's what we
So the
intended.
way I then interpret it is, we're focusing on the village first, then we're moving to partnerships, then we're moving to, look at what we did, everybody. And I'm not sure that juice is going to be worth the squeeze.
So that is, the place where I see this being different, though, is if we do place it more in the downtown design guidelines layer, rather than just a one priority action item, right? Like the DEI was one priority action item, and essentially we have to modify that as a whole council in order to move it beyond that. Whereas at least if we create this more aspirational goal and have a more thorough set of expectations like we do, you know, with a downtown design guideline, we're going to have a more like definitive document to show future councils to say like, these are the expectations that we're
Yep.
setting, and they should be a part of everything that we
So
do.
where it's the same as the downtown guidelines in terms of its
Yeah.
action is fine, I agree.
Yeah.
Where it's different is, we didn't take the downtown guidelines and go, okay, let's apply that all to every village building and show everybody what the downtown guidelines will look like.
Yeah.
Then let's go and talk to our park district and say, hey, these are what the buildings, what we want, let's move, you know? We said, if you're doing something in this area,
Yeah,
this is what we want to see.
yeah.
And we will incentive, oh, well, there's maybe not
I mean,
incentive.
the metaphor has its limits, right?
Yeah, well,
No,
but
no.
to be fair, like if the downtown design guidelines are also just kind of like a set of standards for, I mean, let's be honest, like aesthetic purposes, right? Like that is, there was nothing to learn from them, right? There was not a, you know, this had a, not let me finish that.
She says to the guy who worked long and hard on hospital.
In the way that, like, let's say the village created a building, right, and it maybe didn't meet what our expectations would be. That probably wouldn't be realistic, because essentially we're the ones that are setting the expectations. The problem, I think the difference that we have with this one is that historically, we haven't had the expertise to say, these are the things that we can plan for, right? We had that a little bit with downtown design guidelines. We kind of had some expectations, some things that were successful, some things that weren't. It kind of wasn't as big of a lift. I see this a little bit different from that, where we don't necessarily know, you know, we'll have our baseline conditions, but we don't necessarily know moving forward where our biggest impact is going to be. And so we don't want to start off by incentivizing things that are not going to have a good bang for our buck just because we might think they'd be good.
Yeah.
Like, for example, like a green roof, which we do have a green roof, but we also know, you know, as we got into that, there were limitations about what we could do, and it took us getting into that process to learn that. And so that, I think that's kind of where I'm coming at, is that I don't want to start in the community by incentivizing things that we maybe don't actually fully understand yet, because we haven't been through the process.
And that's what I said.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah,
one
yeah,
of my points was,
yeah.
it's hard for me to
So I'm
answer
with
this
you
without
there.
knowing.
Yeah.
And I'll just finish by saying, I do not, while I am super proud of the DEI initiatives, that's not where I want to stop with this.
Correct.
That's all.
I would
So
agree.
one of the things that this staff member is going to have, and a chance to talk to the other team, is the council's done a better job, for me, as terms directions of framing up comp plan, aspirational, community-wide, 20-year plus horizon, right? Environmental sustainability plan, maybe a little more meat on the bones, a little less aspirational, a little more focus on vision and goals. Probably hits on community and our organization. LRP, 2 to 3 to 5 year horizon,
Yep.
right? And so we're dropping details,
Yep.
and maybe the first round of LRP, so the hits that we'll base from the comp plan to the sustainability plan, maybe we'll pick 5 things that we start with ourselves, and
Yep.
maybe there'll be 1 or 2 things that are easing pathways.
Got it.
So that's what this staff member's taken in. It's
Sure.
been very helpful to hear the council. You want all
Yeah.
3 slots. You want aspirational down to action, and perhaps this is a good way to sort of direct that. That's what we're hearing. So that's
Yeah.
what I'm hearing
Yeah.
so far.
I think that's
Yeah.
accurate.
Yes.
And then one last question.
We probably answered that one
I
already.
think we hope so, Brian.
Yeah, so this is really kind of getting the idea of the GRC framework and how it should be used in drafting the plan, right? So the scope so far has been really talked about as being the basis of this sustainability plan, but that can mean a lot. So help us interpreting this, and just to give you an idea, in the GRC framework, there's 10 categories. So these are the 10 categories, right? So the approach to trying to prioritize or narrow the scope here could be focusing on categories, or based on the conversation, the guiding principles that we're gonna put together from here is how do you look through that framework and identify certain objectives or goals throughout the plan. So I guess confirmation of reduce the scope, don't try to attack this as a literal
Yes.
framework to use, or
And frankly,
Yeah.
again, for this staff member, what you've said already, I think probably
Yes.
already answers this question. You've given us direction to use comp plan, sustainability plan, and LRPs to hit sort of all levels in a stack rather than going step by step through a GRC.
Yes.
This maybe goes without saying, but, with some focus on the low-hanging fruit. So,
Yep.
right, like, things that we can easily do that we haven't done yet.
Well, if you
We
run
gotta
through that whole
get them.
GRC, there's stuff that's
Yeah.
beyond our scope anyway.
yeah.
Right.
So
The opposite,
it's
yeah.
it's a list that we can keep looking at for reminders of where to look. And as I point earlier, the biggest possibilities that are within our scope are where to tackle stuff. And then you get done and you go back and look again.
And I would add the existing conditions report will include some additional analysis of the GRC framework to those exact points, right? I mean, what kind of actions are they?
That's great.
Yeah, I guess unless anybody has any other comments on this, just wanted to check in and see if there's anything else that we've missed.
You really want to ask that question?
I think we're good.
All right,
We're not-
all right,
we're
Chris,
not done
go
yet.
ahead. Oh, jeez. I was asked.
Come on,
to
Gil
have a
Martin, what do you
discussion. Well, here's what I have. I'm glad you're here.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yes. Second that.
Yeah.
All right. Comments from the audience about what you've listened to tonight?
Just a couple, I wanted to mention a couple of things, as you can probably expect. I was very pleased to hear the discussion of, the concept of, that came up under question 3, but also we talked a lot about in the first question in defining what does sustainability mean. Are we talking about just the village's own operations, the facilities, fleet operations, or are we focusing on, that and, other ways that the village can influence the environment mediated through the community, right? I mean, which is through incentives or, setting an example or regulations or offering services, the village, people of the village recycle more because we offer curbside recycling pickup, right? I mean, that's a service the village offers. It's been here ever since I've been here, but it had to start at some point. And to that, and all of those seem important, and certainly should be part of the aspiration, the goal, the overall goal. And as Jason pointed out, you can have more influence that way. I mean, in the one of the first slides, we had the greenhouse emissions from village operations versus the community as a whole. And the community is like 10 times more. So you want to have an effect, you got to think in terms of the whole community. I would add one element to that, which is that hasn't been talked about, I think, which is the village's management of the open and green spaces within the community. I mean, aside from the parkways, the village owns and operates a bunch of open spaces for stormwater retention, and how we operate those is, you know, one aspect of living lightly on the planet. And the village can cooperate with the park district and school districts, who are also large landowners, you know, open space owners in the village. And the village has an ownership stake in Lyman Woods, which is, you know, this huge natural asset that, you know, that we don't often think of it as a village asset, but the village has 1/3 ownership, along with the park district and the forest preserve. So that's one thing to consider. And then just in terms of the role of the GRC, that was talked about a little bit. Yeah, it's a real encyclopedic, you know, hundreds of items of things that you could do, and there's no way everyone could do all of them. And some of them clearly don't apply to Downers Grove because they have to do with greenfield development or whatever, which is not going to happen here. You know, yeah, we have to pick the things that fit us best, the low-hanging fruit, things that have worked in other communities that we can point to. You know, on the other hand, if something comes up that doesn't seem to find a home within the GRC, we shouldn't let that stop us. If there's something, if there's an idea that comes up that seems like it doesn't fit in any of those categories, it might be a good idea anyway, you know, if it seems like it makes sense from other perspectives. That's it for me.
Anyone else?
Well, I really sat through this because I thought we were going to be talking about expanding the sidewalks and getting rid of the parking, so that's why I sat through this, but I guess we weren't talking about that. But I did want to mention when I was watching this, the last study was done in 2019, and that what you were talking about. Well, it seems that these new buildings that we have weren't here in 2019. They're pretty big, going up to the sky now. That whole corridor is terrible, so I don't really know that our emission's going to go down from that. And we're keep building. We're going to be building another big building north of the tracks. And then with the new village hall that we just did, was in with the business owners, with Mr. King, about guiding Downers Grove. And I asked if there was going to be a parking garage underneath the building, so this way, and he said, we looked into it. They looked into it, but they said it wasn't feasible. So I did hear somebody, you know, saying we shouldn't like not do something because it's going to be more cost. And then I said, well, what about, are they going to put a parking garage there? And they said they looked into that too, but it wasn't feasible, so they're just going to have parking. My understanding is we're going to be bringing a lot of the other employees that are from school districts and whatnot. There's going to be a lot of more traffic coming into downtown to fill up this big building that we just built. So I really would like to see you take into consideration when you're looking at your numbers, all these extra people that are going to be driving their cars into downtown Downers Grove. And now we sold this building and they're going to be putting apartments up. So I really think those numbers are going to rise and not really necessarily go down. But my 2 cents, I don't want you to get rid of parking on Main Street and Curtis, so I'll wait till you guys discuss that.
Y'all wore me out.
We wore ourselves out.
Yeah. Just that in keeping along the lines of reviewing the comp plan and the zoning and the terrible corridor on Maple Avenue, and there's no green space along those lines, and no setbacks, and just you have to change the building requirements to make it green to be compatible with sustainability, and have some grass around and make it more livable and attractive. And those, Maple Avenue doesn't work. Yeah, it doesn't work, and it is not the example for the rest of the village or for Fairview Avenue. And I think you need to take that into account and change your building guidelines and your zoning requirements in order to make these areas more sustainable. But otherwise, I'm done to warm me up.
Okay. Anything else from council for the moment? More to come. All right, is there a motion to adjourn?
Move to adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? We are adjourned. Thank you all. Have a good night.